After the apocalypse, my boyfriend fell in love with the daughter of his stepmother, his mistress. Everyone wished for my death to make way for her happiness. Before I turned into a zombie, a desperate stray dog shoved half a sprouting potato into my mouth. A dog that owned nothing, yet genuinely wanted me to live. Now that I have the fortune to be reborn before the apocalypse, in this life, I not only seek revenge, but also intend to ensure that the dog and I survive well through the apocalypse. Chapter 1, Rebirth. I have been reborn. I was reborn before I sold off properties at a low price to gather funds to buy my boyfriend Lincoln's freedom from contractual obligations. Currently, I am on a call with Lincoln's mother, Ava. The boss says if we can't come up with $5 million in 7 days, he'll not only give Lincoln a criminal record but also cripple his hands. I've sold the house and combined it with our savings over the years to scrape together $7 million. What can we do about the remaining shortfall, Ava? Lincoln's mother asked anxiously, her voice tinged with tears. I hung up the phone expressionlessly and blocked all ways she could contact me. I understood what she meant. She was asking me what to do, but really she was urging me to hurry up and get the money to save her son. In my previous life, I tirelessly sold the house my mother left me and my newly bought car, along with all my savings, barely managing to fill the $5 million shortfall for them. Lincoln and I were both children missing a father figure, and our mothers supported each other to raise us. After my mother passed away from illness, his mother and he showed me a lot of care, so I accepted Lincoln's long-standing pursuit and considered them my only remaining family. For years after Lincoln's debut, he still returned as a nobody. I thought it was fine. Having dreams is a good thing. Besides, he had an outstanding appearance, was talented, and hardworking enough to make it someday. Lincoln acted heroically and beat up a company director who was sexually harassing a female colleague, breaking his jaw. I thought it wasn't a big problem. It's good for young people to be upright and spirited. The boss only cared about seeing money to negotiate a settlement, so I did everything I could to gather the funds, thinking we could always start over if needed. The apocalypse arrived suddenly, and the three of us were left homeless, unable to bear seeing them suffer. I swallowed my pride and took them to seek refuge with my estranged biological father. How did they repay me? Lincoln got together with the daughter of my stepmother, his mistress, and I became the villain disrupting their harmonious family. I was like a thorn in everyone's side. They couldn't wait for me to disappear. Yet they hypocritically didn't want to strip off their guise of kindness and generosity. So when the zombie horde approached, they showed their true colors and pushed me out to die, and even Lincoln did not object. Thus, in my last moments in my past life, I was unexpectedly cared for by a stray dog. Chapter 2, Gaining something for nothing. Only 30 days remain until the apocalypse. Knowing Lincoln and his mother's connections, without my help, unless Lincoln's mother could grow 4 kidneys to sell, they would never be able to cover the $5 million shortfall in 7 days. And the boss was always ruthless. Being publicly beaten and humiliated at his company's annual meeting by an unknown third-rate artist was not something he would let go of easily. Lincoln's hands were doomed. How could a man without functional hands take care of his frail mother during the apocalypse? They wouldn't stand a chance even without my intervention. I felt a brief satisfaction, but I couldn't afford to indulge in my hatred, because the priority now was to secure a large sum of money to prepare for life after the apocalypse for me and the stray dog, Momo. I still needed to sell the house my mother left me, but I had a clever idea to gain something for nothing. I made dozens of posters with Momo's photo, offering a substantial reward, and posted them in densely populated areas nearby, hoping someone would spot Momo and contact me. I also rented a warehouse with a cold storage near the community and then drove to the Georgia supermarket in the east of the city. Georgia was a business owned by my biological father, Gabriel. The names were taken from the names of his children with his current wife, clearly expressing his hopes for his children. I walked straight into Gabriel's office after getting out of the car. Gabriel didn't recognize me immediately. After all, it had been nearly 10 years since we last met at my mother's funeral. Ever since I found out about his affair and the child born from it, no matter how he tried to please me, I never called him again. After my mom divorced him, we didn't take a penny from him and refused to meet with him again. Before he could fully realize that I was his long-lost daughter, I called out Dad, and tears started streaming down my face involuntarily. He was quite startled by my sudden emotional outburst and quickly stood up to help me sit down. I told him that I was married now, and my husband had caused a traffic accident that killed 2 people and left an elderly man with severe brain injuries lying in the ICU, awaiting treatment. I needed money to cover the medical expenses for the injured and to provide civil compensation to the families of the deceased, hoping to get a lighter sentence for my husband. Gabriel clearly didn't expect that after years of my refusal of his concern, I would show up asking for money. However, feeling somewhat guilty over the years, he fell silent for a moment and then asked how much I was short. Choking back sobs, I replied, "I'm short too, 3 million yuan. Just then, Gabriel's current wife, Hannah, briskly walked in and immediately began to refuse on his behalf. "Ava, You know the economy has been tough these past years. Your dad's funds are all tied up in inventory or needed for payroll, not to mention the bad debts we can hardly recover. Where are we supposed to find over 2 million for you? Hearing her say this, my face flushed with embarrassment, but with a look of desperation, I could only gaze helplessly at Gabriel. Gabriel, perhaps still unable to bear seeing the daughter he once dearly loved being pushed into a corner, interrupted Hannah, saying, Ava, your dad really wants to help, but honestly, I can't come up with that much. I can try to scrape together 500,000 yuan for you. I slumped in disappointment, and after a moment of silence, I said, Dad, I understand your difficulties. Look, I just took over a small supermarket, and before it even opened, this disaster struck. I foresee that it will be a long time before I have money to stock up again. Could you give me 500,000 yuan worth of inventory from your warehouse? I'll write an IOU. Consider it a loan from you. Is that okay? Before they could respond, I added, the apartment Mom left me, I'm thinking of selling it. Do you know anyone needing a spot at the 4th high school who could pay cash in 3 days? I'll take 2 million for it. The paperwork can be done on the day of payment, though it will take me a month to vacate the place, knowing their son, George, would soon be entering high school, and 4th high school being one of the best in C province. Not to mention the market price of the apartment was 6 million, and I was asking for only 2 million. Hannah couldn't possibly resist the deal, and her previous claims of being short on funds were likely just excuses. Sure enough, Hannah eagerly spoke up again. It's tough for you, my child, and as elders, it's our inability to help more that has brought you to this point of selling the house. We can take the goods, and we'll buy the apartment. We'll find a way to borrow money to make up the 2 million. We can't let you sell it to someone else and never be able to return home, can we? Gabriel didn't contradict Hannah's decision, so we agreed that I would bring someone to pick up the goods from the warehouse the next day, and they would gather the money by the day after to go through the property transfer at the housing bureau. Before leaving, I casually asked Gabriel if I could take the pothose plant on his desk. This unassuming pothose was my main target for this visit. It would mutate after the apocalypse arrives, its transformed branches not only harder and stronger than steel but also fire-resistant, quickly climbing up the exterior walls of the supermarket and fortifying it impenetrably. In my previous life, the existence of this pothose provided the Gabriel's family a safe and comfortable haven right at the start of the apocalypse, even after 2 years. When they were in danger, they would still push me out as a scapegoat. This time, they wouldn't be so lucky. Early in the morning, I drove along with 2 medium-sized trucks, a refrigerated truck, and 9 movers to Georgia. Gabriel was already waiting for me at the warehouse entrance as agreed. Along with the 9 workers, we first headed to the home appliance section. On the day of the apocalypse, the temperature surged from the deep winter cold directly into the height of summer. For at least the 2 years I survived, the temperatures in Province C remained above 50 degrees Celsius. Those who couldn't adapt to the new environment, even if they escaped the zombies, would likely not survive. With the Devil's Ivy providing shade and cooling, the indoor temperature could be reduced to around 40 degrees Celsius. However, this temperature was still far from comfortable. So I planned to head north to the 3 northeastern provinces with Momo after preparations were complete. Air conditioners were ineffective under extreme weather conditions, and the noise from the external units attracted too much attention, so air conditioners were not part of my purchasing plan. I picked up 5 units each of standing fans, table fans, cool air fans, and humidifiers, 3 units each of electric kettles, rice cookers, pressure cookers, microwaves, ovens, electric cooking pots, and induction cookers, among other kitchen appliances. I also grabbed 30 power strips to prepare for possible extreme cold 2 years later. I also took 10 oil-filled radiators. Half the workers operated forklifts to move these appliances into the trucks, while the rest followed me to the daily necessities section. I took 10 boxes each of different brands of shampoo, shower gel, and laundry detergent, 3 boxes each of dishwashing liquid, cleaning agents, and various disinfectants like 84, 10 boxes of mosquito coils, and 5 boxes of insecticides. A total of 50 boxes of various types of toilet paper, kitchen towels, and wet wipes, 50 rolls each of aluminum foil, cling wrap, preservation bags, and trash bags. I picked up several sets of pots, pans, ladles, cups, spoons, chopsticks, and various types of knives. I also took enough sanitary pads, towels, toothpaste, toothbrushes, cleaning tools, underwear, thermal wear, cotton clothes, pants, socks, slippers, duvet sets, cooling mats, and insulated cups and pots to last me alone for 15 years. Moving on to the food section, where there was an abundance to choose from, I had the warehouse keeper follow my list closely, focusing on instant and frozen foods, a small amount of ice cream and carbonated drinks, various kinds of dried fruits, legumes, milk powder, lotus root powder, sesame paste, cereals, seasoning materials like oil, salt, vinegar, Vacuum-packed grains, a small amount of flour, canned fruits and meats. Biscuits, puffed food, candies, chocolates, spicy strips, and a large amount of frozen meat from chickens, ducks, fish, beef, lamb, and pork. For perishable foods, I had the workers quickly move them to the refrigerated truck to prevent them from melting. The rest of the goods were sorted by category by my workers and the warehouse keeper, packed in uniformly sized boxes, and loaded onto the trucks. All goods were settled at wholesale prices, totaling 600,000 yuan, which was 100,000 over budget. I happily wrote a promissory note for 600,000 yuan and handed it to Gabriel. "If you can survive the apocalypse, come find me to repay the debt," I said, as I left with my haul. Once the goods were successfully delivered to the warehouse I rented, I settled the day's wages for the drivers and workers. By then, it was already dark. Standing at the warehouse door, I checked my phone for any missed calls. Confirming there was no news from Momo, I planned to head north as scheduled. And if there was still no clue about Momo's whereabouts by tomorrow, I intended to hire people to search the surrounding area thoroughly. Putting away my phone, I carefully walked home on the partially melted snow on the sidewalk, carrying a box with devil's ivy. Out of the corner of my eye, I was suddenly drawn to a figure under the green belt by the roadside. Stopping to look, it appeared to be a small white dog. Using its front paws to dig through the snow and occasionally bowing its head to eat, my heart raced, and I cautiously approached. The little white dog heard me and looked up, its chubby mouth moving. It was her. It really was Momo. Excited, I jumped up and ran towards her, laughing and calling out, "Momo, come here, Momo." Momo recognized me too, abandoning her food and running to my feet, happily jumping up for me to pet her. She was wet, her nose and ears cold. I picked her up, wrapped her in my down jacket to keep her warm, and hurried home. I was curious about what she had been eating just now. Passing the hole she had dug, I bent down for a look. There was no sign of food in the hole, just some dry leaves and broken ice. She was just desperately eating the leaves. I tried to control my tears, sniffed, and rubbing my chin against Momo's head, I told her, "Sister won't let you suffer anymore. You'll eat well with me." Chapter 3. Before I died in my previous life 8 hours after being bitten by a zombie, I no longer felt the pain from the wound. Strictly speaking, I had lost most of my sensation and my thinking had become sluggish. This is good. At least I no longer have to endure the heart-wrenching betrayal. I mechanically dodged the zombies wandering the streets, although it seemed unnecessary since they showed no interest in me. After all, zombies crave fresh flesh, and I was practically a pile of dead meat. The obsession to return home was my last breath as a human. Home, not to the house with my father, stepmother, and their children, but my real home, where I grew up. My home was on the 7th floor of an old residential building. Climbing that high was a challenge for a severely injured woman, but I was already half a zombie now, and for a zombie, climbing was effortless. I had sold this apartment for a pittance before the apocalypse. The property had changed hands, the locks had been changed, and I could no longer enter. I tied my legs to the metal railing and lay down by the door, thinking that I could end everything in front of the home I shared with my mother, without having to watch my enemies perform their insincere acts, and not wander around causing trouble after turning into a zombie. This ending didn't seem too bad. The craving for flesh grew stronger, and my consciousness became increasingly blurred. In a daze, I felt something stepping on my fragile sternum, quickly pacing back and forth on top of me. I didn't feel pain, just a creepy sensation. I wasn't dead yet, and I wondered if I was about to be gnawed on by a large rat. Considering this possibility, I lifted my head in a last flicker of clarity and locked eyes with a pair of bright, beady eyes. The owner of the eyes realized I was awake. Its tail wagged like a propeller, its entire body driven by its wagging rear, as it happily twisted, whimpering and licking my face, bouncing even more joyfully on me, although its long fur was matted with mud, dust, and bloodstains, forming a thick felt so dirty its original color was indiscernible. I still recognized it. Before the apocalypse, it was a stray dog that made a living in our area. Its fur was matted from lack of care, and from the first time I saw it, it had a dreadlock style, so I called it Momo. Momo occasionally rummaged through the garbage behind the deli near our complex entrance. If I happened to see it, I would pour it a bowl of clean water and open a can of pet food I carried with me. I was surprised it was still alive because from what I had observed, it wasn't very old or smart when it was a stray. I really didn't know how it managed to survive among hordes of zombies. Regardless, having a familiar dog see me off before I died was comforting, though given its clueless demeanor, I worried it might enthusiastically nuzzle up to me even after I turned into a zombie, effectively offering itself as a meal. I decided to scare it away. I pushed it off me, bared my teeth, and made a unique zombie growl. It rolled on the ground after being pushed, then stood up and stared at me blankly. I responded with threatening gestures. It pouted at me with a whimper, then turned and scampered out of my sight. Its retreating figure really resembled those long-tailed sheep from the Northwest, plump and juicy without a hint of gamey smell. Luckily, the silly kid knew enough to be scared and ran off quickly. I wiped away the drool almost spilling from the corner of my mouth and continued to lie down, waiting for death. Tap 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 tap. I sat up with a headache, just in time to see Momo wagging its tail, carrying a dead snake in its mouth, happily running towards me and jumping onto my lap. I was overwhelmed. Yes, I was close to death, but that didn't mean I was fearless, even if I were dead, cremated, and buried. If someone threw a snake on my grave, I could even run 300 meters with a tombstone on my back. I abruptly tossed Momo and its trophy off of me. Momo, maintaining its fallen posture, cautiously glanced at me, its tail wagging slightly in appeasement. Anyone who has ever had a dog could read its body language at that moment. It didn't know what it had done wrong, but it sensed it might have angered me. Although scared, as soon as it saw my expression soften, it would cheerfully approach me without a care. I wasn't really angry, but seeing it so oblivious to danger, with eyes only for my foolish self, I had to harden my heart. I grabbed a stack of delivery boxes beside me, threw them forcefully at it, and pretended to roar in anger, "Get out of here," after being hit a few times. It looked at me with a hurt and puzzled expression. Seeing no sign of me letting up, it finally tucked its tail and scurried away along the wall. Gasping, I lay down, guessing it wouldn't come back this time. I had already returned home, said farewell to an old friend, and even did several sit-ups due to the unexpected appearance of this old dog. However, my last breath was hanging on much longer than I anticipated. The sun was about to set, and as I examined my hands under the fading light, veins bulging, a terrifying purplish black, barely recognizable as human, I heard those familiar footsteps again. I was resigned to my fate. What sins had this little dog committed in its past life to deserve being reborn with the mind of a pig in a dog's body? It sat beside me, looking down, not jumping on me as it had done before. I got up, picked it up, and placed it on my lap. It seemed completely unfazed by my fearsome appearance and scent, lying affectionately on me and dropping something mushy from its mouth, scraping it towards me with its paws. It was a dirty, half-eaten potato with sprouts emerging from several eyes. Perhaps in its understanding, my near-death appearance was due to hunger, so it shared its prey with me, and after being chased away, thinking I didn't want to eat meat, it dug up its reserve stash and brought it to me with great care. I patted its head, but didn't take the potato. It nudged the potato with its nose and tilted its head, looking at me. I hugged it close, running my hands through its coarse fur. Struggling out of my embrace, it picked up the potato, stood on my shoulder, and brought it to my mouth, eagerly waiting for me to bite into its treasured potato. I'm not sure if all puppies are like this. Before the apocalypse, I was a lawyer, traveling most of the year for court appointments, with no condition to keep pets. I just carried some food and occasionally provided for some miserable stray cats and dogs to ease my conscience. That was all I could do back then, providing occasional food and water. Momo was just one of many strays I had fed, and we had only met a few times. Yet, because of the little kindness I had once shown it, at a time when it faced its own uncertain fate, when my beloved boyfriend and so-called family had abandoned me without hesitation, it wanted to trade everything it had for my life. I thought my human emotions had died before my soul, but at that moment, tears flowed. Smiling, I took Momo's potato, wiped off the dust on my clothes, took a big bite, and vigorously rubbed Momo's mob-like head, praising, "Wow, this is delicious. Which little doggy is so capable? Huh, while humans are starving, this little doggy still managed to find a potato." Infected by my exaggerated tone, it proudly spun around a couple of times, squinting its eyes and happily sticking out its tongue. Since I had lost my sense of taste anyway, I just continued in front of Momo, eating its little potato bit by bit, while continuously giving insincere flattery. The toxin was the final straw that overwhelmed my battered body. I began to gasp for air, feeling the urge to vomit, and I knew the time was almost upon me, while Momo was blissfully chasing its tail. I took out the triangular spike I carried with me and plunged it into my temple, in my final moments. I thought I heard Momo's cries of sorrow. "Keep it down, you fool. What if you attract the zombies? Don't wait in vain for someone who won't return, like Hachiko. I hope you'll always be a happy little dog. Thank you for seeing me off on my last journey. Goodbye, Momo." Then the world fell into silent darkness. Chapter 4. Saving the Bernese Mountain Dog. The life of a stray can be harmful to an animal's health in various ways. I planned to first take Momo to the 24-hour pet hospital near my house for a full checkup and deworming. Its long, tangled, and dirty fur also needed professional attention. On the way to the hospital, Momo wriggled restlessly in my arms, thinking it wanted to walk. I set it down and called for it to follow me, unexpectedly. It just stood there looking at me for a couple of seconds before suddenly turning and sprinting away. What was that about? Was it reluctant to leave a pile of leaves it had just found? Perplexed, I chased after it. Our chase continued like an ice skating race until I, with my longer legs, easily caught up and scooped it off the ground. Struggling nonstop, I brought Momo to the hospital and handed it over to the vet. I couldn't help but remark on how wild this little dog really was. The checkup showed that Momo was surprisingly healthy, which was a huge relief to me. As the vet used shearing motions similar to those used on sheep to shave Momo, we chatted. This little guy has been a well-known stray in our area. When he first started roaming, he was just a chubby little pup without a mother to care for him, always getting bullied by stray cats and other dogs. Our receptionist felt sorry for him and posted adoption notices, but unfortunately, no one wanted him. Luckily, he's finally going to have a home. Wow, this little guy has taken good care of himself. Look, once you shave off the dirty fur, he's plump and white like a little pig. After shedding its dirty braids, Momo truly looked like an adorable chubby dog with bright, round almond eyes, large ears hanging down like pigtails, a short nose, a short and broad mouth, slightly curly white fur, and pink pads on its paws. I guessed it must be a mix with some Shih Tzu blood. When we left the pet hospital, it started snowing. I put Momo in a newly bought pet backpack, wore it on my chest, and hastened my pace. Momo fluttered inside the backpack, wanting to get out, whimpering and whining urgently. I wondered if it needed to defecate, but after walking it around a grassy area for a while, there were no signs of it needing to relieve itself. Once we got home, I immediately opened a can of food for it. It ate restlessly and then rushed to the front door, sitting despondently, glancing at the door and then at me, wanting to go out. It's really hard to guess what a little dog is thinking. Exhausted, I just laid a lambswool blanket at the door for it to lie on and continue guarding, while I lay down on the nearby sofa to sleep. With much to do the next day, countdown to the apocalypse, 28 days, morning came, and Momo was still guarding the door. After giving it some food and water and leaving a piece of freeze-dried rabbit, I hurried out. When I get the money from Gabriel, I must figure out what's really going on with it. I called Gabriel and arranged to meet at Georgia, and then we would go to the housing bureau together. I took this opportunity to meet an old employee at Georgia, Uncle Gavin, the head of security, who had been working there for 15 years. Uncle Gavin was from my mother's hometown. He and Aunt Abigail's only child had Down syndrome. The couple had endured enough of people's criticism about their daughter back home and could not accept relative suggestions to abandon their worthless burden. Here's a translation that captures the essence and meaning of the text, rather than a direct literal translation. Recommendations for having a healthy child in an effort to provide a better environment for their daughter. A couple sought to break free from their hometown and came to my mother for help. At that time, my mom was a co-owner of a supermarket and also a mother to a daughter. She felt deeply for their sick child and was relieved that the child had parents who loved her wholeheartedly. Therefore, she arranged for Uncle Gavin to work as a security guard at the supermarket and found Aunt Abigail a job as a hospital aide. After the fiasco caused by Gabriel came to light, Uncle Gavin was disgusted. Following my mom's nearly penniless divorce, he immediately resigned from his job. However, my mom persuaded him to stay, reminding him that the position of head of security was hard to come by and that he needed to provide a stable life for his daughter and not let financial concerns affect him. Uncle Gavin stayed, but he and his wife couldn't help feeling guilty towards my mom. In a previous life after an apocalypse, I, along with Lincoln and his mother, sought refuge at Georgia, where this couple took good care of me. They were among the few survivors in the supermarket who showed me kindness. Feeling emotionally indebted, Uncle Gavin's stance was naturally biased. Moreover, loving his daughter, he always wanted to save enough for her future before he lost his ability to work. I intended to give him some money, and all he needed to do was a small favor within his capabilities, which he agreed to. I found him in the surveillance room at Georgia, signaled him to stay quiet, and followed me outside. We walked one after the other into the alley behind the supermarket, where there were no cameras. Uncle Gavin was surprised to see me. He didn't know that I had approached Gabriel a few days ago. "Ava, what are you doing here? Are you looking for manager? I'm here to see you, Uncle Gavin. It's been a long time. I was hoping to catch up over dinner. If you're free." Uncle Gavin was somewhat puzzled. While my mom had kept in touch with them, I had barely interacted with them, and he couldn't understand what old times I had to reminisce about. But he immediately answered, yes, anytime." We exchanged numbers and agreed to have dinner in the next few days. I let Uncle Gavin return to work and went back to my car, waiting for the Gabriel couple to appear. Gabriel was punctual, but it wasn't just him and his wife. Hannah and George also came along. They were planning to transfer the house my mother left behind into their children's names. When it comes to disgusting tactics, Hannah was a master. She forced the legitimate daughter to transfer the house to the illegitimate children born from the mistress, feeling triumphantly satisfied, a sentiment that couldn't be simply described by the phrase raising one's eyebrows in disdain. It was enough for her to boast in her circle of mistresses for a lifetime, and my so-called father, either heartless or also wanting to disgust us, the ungrateful mother and daughter, tacitly allowed it. Without much small talk, I received the house payment, and the transfer procedures went very smoothly. Before dispersing, I declared once more, although the procedures are done, I need 30 days to pack up my things before handing over the house to you. Just 28 days until the apocalypse. I wouldn't give them the chance to enter my home and disrespect my mother. Feeling assured the deal was secure, Hannah smugly said with fake politeness, "That's being too formal. The property title may be in your siblings' names, but it's still your home. We can't possibly evict you," I thought to myself. Although ominous, she wasn't wrong. Gabriel's parents had passed away, and you, Hannah, are an orphan. Once your whole family is gone, I will be the sole legal heir. If there's an end to this apocalypse, not only will my house ultimately remain mine, but Gabriel's supermarket and all your family assets will also be mine. Before people die, they should have a full meal, right? I'll let you hold on to the property title and enjoy a few more days. Returning home to unlock the door, I could hear Momo's anxious pattering feet through the security door. As soon as I cracked the door open, a white figure darted out from the gap. He disappeared from my sight, thumping down the stairs like a rabbit. I paused for a second, then quickly grabbed a leash from the shoe cabinet and chased after him downstairs. When I stepped out of the building, he was on the lawn relieving himself. He glanced at me when he heard my footsteps, didn't continue to run away, and obediently lifted his head to let me slip the leash on him. I noticed he was holding something in his mouth. Pulling it out, I realized it was the rabbit chop I had left for him before leaving the house. Now soggy with his saliva, Momo anxiously stood up on his hind legs, placing his front paws on me, looking at me with big, hopeful eyes, wanting the rabbit chop back. I put the chop back into his mouth, and he happily rubbed his head against my hand and wagged his tail to thank me, then started sniffing around the ground, wiggling his behind. As Momo sniffed and chose his path, he led me out of the neighborhood, through a nearby park, and to a cluster of abandoned buildings. Once we entered this dilapidated area, Momo's sniffing and running speed increased, pulling me into a jog. While running past a drainage ditch, I heard a squeak, and the white figure running ahead of me disappeared. I suddenly felt a strong pull on the leash in my hand. When I looked closer, it turned out Momo had accidentally stepped into a hole where a drain cover was missing and had tumbled into the ditch, legs up in the air. I leaned over the gap, saw him right himself like a turtle flipping over, and without pausing, he continued along the ditch. I quickly grabbed the leash and called him back. He turned around and came back at my call. I tried to pull him up, but he twisted his body to avoid my hands, looking at me with a mix of sadness and urgency. He whined with the rabbit chop in his mouth, continually turning his head toward the depths of the drain. I couldn't help but recall that since I took him away yesterday, Momo had been very anxious. Could it be because he had hidden puppies in the drain? But he's a male, and male dogs don't nurse, do they? But what if I let go of the leash? Momo dragged the leash behind him and ran into the darkness. I followed the sounds on the ground. He stopped, and I heard a crisp bark. I kneeled and lifted the nearby drain cover with effort. A strong smell of blood hit my face instantly. In the drain wasn't a group of whining puppies, but a nearly disemboweled Bernese mountain dog. Momo nestled next to the Bernese's head, wagging his tail at me, placing the rabbit chop by the Bernese's mouth. But the large dog lay on its side, motionless, with no visible signs of breathing, from what I could tell. Its neck and abdomen were covered with large patches of hair matted with dried blood, indicating significant wounds and blood loss. Suddenly, I noticed it weakly turned its head to avoid the sudden sunlight. It was still alive, and I needed to get it to the hospital immediately. I called the pet hospital, shared my location, and asked them to send a vehicle immediately. I regretted not realizing Momo's intentions last night. Now the back and forth on the road would take more time, and I wasn't sure how long the Bernese could survive the blood loss and hypothermia. The drain was narrow, barely enough for the dog. Fearing that moving it could worsen its injuries, I gently climbed down from the head end of the drain and sat beside it. Even though Bernese are a very gentle breed, I couldn't help but worry it might attack me out of self-defense, but it was indeed gentle, noticing someone approaching. It struggled to open its eyes and looked at me. Its clear, silvery gray eyes held no hostility, and its tail weakly wagged. I tried to sound cheerful and said, "Good boy, such a good boy. How about I cover you with a blanket? You won't feel cold then." I gently covered it and Momo with my down jacket, softly touching its forehead. It struggled to lift its head and licked the palm of my hand with its tongue. Tears welled up in my eyes involuntarily, and I gently held one of its icy paws, trying to transfer some warmth to it. However, The Bernese Mountain Dog, which had been very docile under my touch, suddenly jerked its paw back with a large movement. Observing its expression, which did not seem angry or impatient, I didn't take it to heart and offered it a reassuring smile. Its weak, large eyes conveyed a sense of apology and embarrassment as it offered its paw back to me, while I was gently stroking its shoulder and back, wondering how much longer the vet would take to arrive. I accidentally glanced at the paw pad it extended, and suddenly my gaze sharpened. I carefully pried open the paw pad to inspect the crevices. What is this? Looking closely, I saw a series of round scars, old and new, layered on top of each other, each less than 5 millimeters in diameter, resembling marks left by cigarette burns. Damn it, 100 gigabytes of curse words flashed through my mind in an instant, and I trembled with anger. Historically, torturing prisoners by targeting their fingers and toes ranked among the top 10 most brutal tortures. If human fingers are connected to the heart, then dogs are no different, choosing to hurt them under the paw pads, making every step they take a continuous, excruciating pain, is simply despicable to an infuriating extent. Initially, I guessed it was a chained dog that had injured its neck while breaking free, and the abdominal wounds could have been from encounters with other large dogs while roaming, being pinned and bitten during fights, but the injuries between its toes completely overturned my understanding. The injuries on its body were very likely inflicted by humans. I tried to suppress my rage as I searched for other injuries, turning over its ears, just like between the toes. They were densely packed with burns from cigarette ends. Because the Bernese Mountain Dog's ears are floppy, the wounds were trapped in an unventilated environment, making these scars more severe and rotting than those on the feet, faintly emitting a foul smell. A circle of barbed wire tightly embedded into the skin was wrapped around its neck, having injured and healed over the years. The skin around the wire was now bare and unable to grow any fur, carefully parting the fur on its abdomen. A fresh cut from the sternum to the navel lay before me, exposing a thin layer of yellow fat and the vivid red textures of muscle, barely preventing disembowelment. Honestly, having seen various bloody and brutal scenes in case files and in apocalyptic scenarios, I've seen my fair share of human atrocities, but none were enough to diminish my current shock and anger. Let me guess, Little Bern was originally a pet dog, with a financially stable owner who cultivated a loving and gentle human facade in front of others, yet harbored a monstrous sadist at core. She inflicted torture on the dog in the hidden parts of the ears and toes, continuously over the years, using a spiked wire as a collar, parading the dog around town, reveling in the thrill of abusing the dog under the noses of ordinary people. Whether she experimented with other hidden forms of torture like drowning or starvation, I could not tell. Perhaps it was because the Bernese was too submissive, with an extraordinary tolerance for pain, not screaming or fighting back when hurt, which made her increasingly dissatisfied with the slow, painful torment. This time, she was about to flay it alive. Fortunately, facing the master's knife, Little Bern escaped, and even more fortunately, it met Momo, who had a merciful heart. Finally, the doctors arrived. After discussing, we decided to have one of the stronger doctors lifted out of the drainage ditch, then carry it on a stretcher to the car and rush back to the hospital. When the doctor lifted the Bernese, he almost lost his balance, nearly causing both him and the dog to tumble to the ground. We hurriedly reached out to help. It's way too light, lighter than I imagined. That monster probably never fed it enough. I used all my strength, expecting to lift something heavy, but ended up almost dropping what felt like a bundle of cotton, the doctor said, still shaken. Despite Little Bern's large size, akin to a small pony, and its fluffy, semi-long fur, we had misjudged its weight. In reality, it was so skinny, with just a thin layer left. The two doctors carried the patient with surprising ease. The car sped towards the hospital. We were determined to fight for its survival. Xiao Bo was quickly taken to prepare for surgery. Meanwhile, I stayed at the front desk to register and pay in advance. In the pet's name field, I wrote down Jojo. Jojo, tiger, symbolizing vigor and powerful presence. Jojo needed a blood transfusion. After the blood type test results came back, the hospital staff quickly posted notices in several member groups, asking if any large dogs with the same blood type were willing to donate blood to save Jojo. I told the staff that I was offering a substantial reward for immediate assistance. 5 minutes later, a young mother and daughter arrived at the hospital with their Alaskan Malamute, who looked bewildered as it was drawn blood. I tried to offer Mrs. Lynn a reward, but she firmly refused. She explained that any dog owner would do the same in these circumstances, adding that if necessary, she could mobilize more people. Jojo was in poor condition and needed immediate surgery. We were worried that it might not wake up from anesthesia due to complications. Leaving us little energy to dwell on the situation, I took down their address and contact information to thank them later. While waiting for the results of Jojo's surgery, the girl asked Mrs. Lynn, "Mom, why didn't Jojo run away when its previous owner beat it and starved it? If it were me, I'd have bitten that person at the first sign of abuse and then run away." Mrs. Lynn replied, "Do you remember when you were smaller? How you couldn't control your strength and would often pull my hair and scratch my face, even though you're my beloved daughter, you've hurt me too, but when you pulled the dog's whiskers or jumped on it without care, it was always me who stopped and taught you, never the dog getting angry or retaliating, right? Dogs love us unconditionally, and Jojo loved its previous owner too, Mrs. Lynn was right. I couldn't blame abused dogs for not using their teeth and claws to defend themselves. Their nature, genetically embedded, is to love humans. Would humans dare abuse tigers or leopards so recklessly? It's not the dog's fault that some despicable humans exploit this love and protective instinct to harm them. Midway through, the lead surgeon came out of the operating room to inform us that Jojo's condition wasn't too bad. Fortunately, the injuries were superficial, and with proper wound care to prevent infection, it would recover quickly. Furthermore, the doctor discovered that Jojo had cryptorchidism. Since Bernese mountain dogs are prone to cancer, he suggested taking advantage of the anesthesia to remove the potential risk and prevent future cancer. I agreed without hesitation. In these trying times, ensuring Jojo's health was more important than anything else. The surgery went smoothly, and Jojo was wheeled out, still unconscious. It wore an Elizabethan collar, its large ears propped up by the stiff cardboard. Quietly receiving in 4 drip, Mrs. Lynn and her daughter, seeing Jojo safely out of surgery, finally felt relieved and said goodbye, taking their dog home. Momo and I waited in the observation room for Jojo to wake up. Dinner time had passed, and I ordered takeout for the doctors and staff who hadn't had the chance to eat, but I had no appetite. Momo hadn't eaten much all day either, but it seemed to understand its companion's pain and quietly lay beside Jojo, gently pawing at Jojo's Elizabethan collar. I went to the front desk, grabbed a can of food, and poured it into a plastic dish for Momo. It ate only a little before stopping, licking my hand, then trying to lick Jojo's wounds. I quickly managed to control it, gently patting it with one hand and covering Jojo's cold right foreleg from the floor with the other. Most of the staff had left for the day. Jojo's vital signs were stable, but he hadn't woken up yet. The night shift doctor mentioned that due to his slow metabolism and large size, it might take him longer to wake up. He advised me not to worry, to take Momo home and come back the next day. However, I was uncomfortable leaving Jojo alone at the hospital overnight, so I negotiated with the doctor to allow me to stay and keep him company. I rushed home to grab a few things and took Momo out to relieve himself before returning to the hospital. Just as Jojo was waking up, he was groggy, but when he saw us, his tail began to weakly wag as he struggled to get up. I quickly sat down beside him, letting his large head rest on my leg, and placed Momo in front of his nose. The 2 little dogs sniffed each other amicably. Jojo nudged Momo with his nose, which excited the little one to almost take off. I hurriedly held him down and cautioned, "Jojo is still a bit dizzy, Momo. Let's be gentle so he doesn't get nauseous." The doctor came to change Jojo's for, telling me not to worry about monitoring the progress as the machine would alert him when it was almost done. Finally, after a chaotic day, we fell asleep to the rhythmic beeping of the machine. In the morning, I was awakened by the noise of the doctors changing shifts. As I looked down, I met the gaze of 2 pairs of doggy eyes. They seemed to have been awake for a while. Momo, seeing me awake, immediately started fussing to get down from my lap, being afraid of heights. The little one didn't dare jump down by himself. Once I placed him on the floor, he dashed out of the hospital door to a tree to relieve himself. After turning Jojo over and massaging his numb side with the doctor said Jojo could eat, but the form might affect his appetite, and he might not be willing to eat. I sloppily dumped Momo's canned food into a dish and prepared Jojo's prescribed meal by mashing it up, adding some water, and warming it to a lukewarm temperature in the hospital's microwave. To avoid straining his wounds, Jojo could only lie on his side. When I placed the food in front of them, a hungry Momo immediately started gobbling his food, while Jojo reflexively shrank his neck and turned his head away, seemingly indifferent to the food. Yet, I knew it wasn't true as he couldn't help licking his lips and swallowing. I gently turned his head back towards the dish and pushed it closer, saying, "Come on. Eat up, or Momo will snatch it away." Jojo looked at me, as if only then realizing the food was meant for him. He eyed me warily and cautiously moved his mouth closer to the food, making sure I wasn't going to hit him, before finally licking the canned food. It was an awkward position to eat from, and he barely got a taste, but he squinted his eyes, stuck out his tongue, and showed me a contented, happy doggy smile, his tail happily swatting Momo's face. Momo had finished his meal and, despite being smacked, was intently watching Jojo's dish. Under Momo's envious gaze, I spoon-fed the meat to Jojo, who savored each bite. After their meal, the 2 dogs nestled close and dozed off. I was booking a flight to S Province on my phone when suddenly I felt Jojo's throat tighten against my leg. He raised his head, his mouth tightly shut, breathing heavily, his wet eyes fixed on me. I quickly called to a passing doctor, "Doctor, could you please bring a trash can here?" Sure enough, As soon as the trash can was brought to Jojo's mouth, he couldn't hold back and vomited. The food he had just eaten came out almost untouched. I gently supported it while the doctor fed it warm water. The doctor reassured me it might be because it was very hungry before, and the medicine it took irritated the stomach lining. It probably ate too much too quickly and couldn't digest it all. Feeding it slowly in small amounts more frequently should prevent it from throwing up again. While the doctor was saying this, Jojo was happily playing with Momo on my lap, pushing and nibbling at each other. Every now and then, Jojo would stick out its tongue and give me a proud glance, as if proud of itself for not throwing up on me, showing no signs of feeling sorry for itself. It was day 26 of the apocalypse countdown, and Jojo's third day in the hospital. During this time, except for going home to wash up and taking Momo out, we practically lived in the hospital 24/7. Every 2 hours, I would turn Jojo over to massage and feed it, and twice a day with the doctor's assistance, I helped it defecate, taking care of everything myself. One afternoon, when I returned with food, I saw Momo happily rolling around with its tennis ball, while Jojo, somewhat reluctantly, lay on the legs of the female doctor who often cared for it, receiving for inflammation. I sat down at the space near its hindquarters and exchanged pleasantries with the doctor across it. Jojo kept craning its neck to look at me, and after 2 minutes of my inaction, it couldn't help but try to get up and come to me. The doctor and I exchanged a laugh as we switched places, and I hugged Jojo's big head and shook it, saying, "Oh, let's see which naughty dog won't let the doctor hold it." Jojo didn't understand and just smiled naively at me, allowing me to pinch its beard. It was recovering well. No longer the dying state in which I had found it, with time pressing. I had to restart the home buying process that had been unexpectedly delayed. Hearing that I intended to leave Momo at the hospital during my trip, the staff cleared the largest cage, adding a divider in the middle to create 2 spaces. This arrangement would allow them to keep each other company without Momo touching Jojo's wounds. After getting approval from the hospital, I installed a surveillance camera on top of the cage to monitor them in real time from afar. When I said goodbye to the 2 little friends in the cage, they wagged their tails happily, probably thinking that, like the past few days, I was just leaving briefly and would return soon. Chapter 5, Journey to Each One. Those with experience caring for the sick might agree that while the physical tasks in a hospital room aren't too demanding, the emotional stress of continuous anxiety and tension is a significant strain on both mind and body. I'm flying to S Province early tomorrow morning and have decided not to spend another night at the hospital tonight. I need to go home and get a good night's sleep. Unfortunately, some inconsiderate people don't plan to let me have my way. Just as I entered my house, my phone rang with a call from an unfamiliar number. I answered hands-free, placed the phone on the coffee table, and began packing my luggage for the trip. "Ava, you heartless bitch, I'm telling you, if anything happens to my son, I won't let you off the hook. Lincoln's mother's hysterical curses blared from the phone. Since the day I blocked Lincoln's mother, she had almost daily called me from different numbers. I would answer but stay silent, listening before blocking the number. She started with her usual sobbing and pitiful tactics before gradually becoming furious and pressing me with words. Today, she outright tore up our years of friendship, unreservedly venting her panic. Honestly, watching her powerless rage and witnessing her desperate breakdown was one of the few pleasures I had lately. However, Lincoln's mother's illogical accusations today reminded me that in my previous life, she had used the same tactics on someone else, not me, who had squandered her family fortune, but another person, Emma, who had completely disappeared from this storm in both lives. In my previous life, Lincoln had gone missing after getting involved with the boss to defend Emma, and our understanding of the incident came from Lincoln's agent's statements and the boss's threats. Emma, a well-established actress with many fans, is certainly better off financially than those in the lower ranks of the celebrity hierarchy, and she was expected to share some of the settlement money on behalf of Lincoln's family. However, Emma refused to take calls or make any public appearances. Lincoln's mother, unwilling to accept this, planned to go to the extreme measure of blockading Emma's residence and office, but I intervened and stopped her. Emma too is a victim in this situation, although she avoids those who reach out to help her, which might seem cold and ungrateful. It's not unforgivable for a victim of sexual harassment to feel weak and seek to escape when facing their powerful abuser. Moreover, Lincoln, who has been battling through the entertainment industry for years, is not naive enough to believe that good deeds always receive good returns. Seeking benefits and avoiding harm is a natural instinct for most people. If those he helped are unwilling to reciprocate, he must face the consequences of his actions alone. If he can't bear it, at least I'm here to share the burden. Lincoln's mother shouldn't appear as if she wants to take a life just because Emma let her down. Thus, Emma completely disappeared from the public eye for a while. It wasn't until Lincoln sadly exited the industry, just days before his downfall, that Emma unexpectedly re-entered the public eye by getting engaged to a middle-aged man in a high-profile manner. Marketing accounts dug into the mysterious fiancé of the pure and innocent Emma, a middle-aged man who is nearly 20 years her senior and another powerful director at the company where Emma and Lincoln worked. He had been very affectionate to her since they started dating. Lincoln's mother nearly fainted upon seeing the overwhelming news coverage, cursing Emma as ungrateful, blaming her for everything that had happened. She accused Emma of ignoring her benefactor, leading to Lincoln's disgraceful exit from the industry and the loss of his fortune, while Emma herself seemed to thrive both in love and career, lamenting that it was a cruel twist of fate. As for Lincoln, he showed no curses or resentment, only an unmistakable disbelief in his expression. Looking back now, I realize that in my previous life, my perception of Lincoln was perhaps too idealized, which prevented me from seeing how abnormal his reaction was at that time. Last year, when my phone was sent back for repairs, Lincoln used my spare phone for a while. He had even mentioned that if it weren't for iCloud, he might have missed an important work opportunity. I retrieved that spare phone, entered Lincoln's Apple ID, and began attempting to crack the password. After 2 incorrect attempts, on the 3rd try, I entered CMW07181101, and it was successful. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a hidden hacker or anything, it's just that his password was quite predictable, simply a combination of meaningful letters and numbers. I've never done such a thing before out of disdain, but that doesn't mean I couldn't. The password was a combination of the initials of my name, my birthday, and our anniversary, quite touching indeed. Sure enough, Lincoln had enabled iCloud automatic backups for most of his apps. I quickly browsed through his photo gallery, which contained the typical contents you'd expect in any confident straight man's gallery. His contacts, notes, and calendar were all normal. It wasn't until I opened Lincoln's iMessage history that I found something. I clicked into one of the conspicuous message threads and skimmed through. It was a year-long exchange of messages. From hundreds of casual messages exchanged daily at the beginning, to sneaking in games of Connect 4 during busy work hours, to matching leather bracelets worn on each of their wrists, and handwritten poems sent to each other, there were no explicit conversations or images, but the undertones were all suggestive. In the most recent month of communication, the other party shared her concerns about her boss's subtle leering and ambiguous verbal harassment. Questioning Lincoln if she was being overly sensitive and misinterpreting her boss's behavior, Lincoln, naturally, was filled with righteous indignation, his anger palpable. Their conversation ended with a message from Emma. On the night of the annual party, she said, "Lincoln, save me." I couldn't help but wonder, did the boss really lose his senses to the extent of daring to sexually harass another director's girlfriend in public during the annual party, in front of everyone? And slap a business partner's face, even if he was indeed a brazen scoundrel? Why didn't the victim, Emma, seek help from her powerful and influential official boyfriend, instead choosing to drag a low-level employee into the fray? Considering the rumors of intense internal strife between Emma's director boyfriend and the boss, it seems there were deeper layers to the story. Everything became quite obvious, regardless of whether the boss had any romantic intentions towards Emma. By sacrificing a naive fish from her own pond, she could publicly embarrass the boss and leave the entire company with the impression that he was a lustful spirit who disregarded the bigger picture. This not only indirectly favored her boyfriend, but also ensured that the boss couldn't retaliate against her directly. Instead, he would intensify his anger towards Lincoln, ultimately forcing him out of the circle, thereby indirectly helping her deal with the potential problem of her affair with a younger man. No wonder, after this incident was resolved in her past life, that director got engaged to Emma. Her strategy was indeed brilliant, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. A woman so wise and virtuous certainly deserved to be rewarded with the status of a wealthy matron. How ironic it was that Lincoln was never a tragic hero who gallantly stepped in for a colleague with whom he had no prior relationship, only to suffer unjustly. From the beginning to the end, he was merely a fool manipulated by someone he was ambiguously involved with, a scoundrel who would drag down his own mother and girlfriend in a fit of rage for a woman. Of course, such an eyesore couldn't be ignored. I organized all the information overnight, preparing to send Lincoln a significant gift. 25 days until doomsday, when the flight arrived in the capital of S province. Stepping out of the plane, the cold air of the northeast harshly struck my frail body, giving me a real sense of how cold -30 degrees Celsius could be if the extreme heat of doomsday were to end and be followed by extreme cold. My dog and I would have to survive the harsh cold without heating or a heated bed, which instantly cooled my heart. Shivering I pulled out my phone and noted down an important reminder to stock up on cold weather supplies. After leaving the airport, I took a rideshare to a prefecture-level city in S province called Yichuan. Yichuan, with its long coastline, was once a famous tourist destination in North China and the Northeast, thanks to the local government's strong support for the tourism industry. However, it has declined over the past 10 years, especially after the pandemic, which greatly impacted the local economy. Driving through the streets of Yichuan, I saw few pedestrians and vendors, with nearly half of the shops tightly shuttered and sparse traffic on the roads, presenting a scene of desolation and silence. As our car headed towards the suburbs, getting closer to my destination, the buildings became increasingly sparse and scattered, with only a small cluster of self-built houses occasionally passing by. Hardly any people in sight. Based on the current situation, I was fairly satisfied. The average summer temperature in Yichuan over the years was 7 to 8 degrees Celsius lower than that in low-latitude inland areas, which was conducive to the long-term preservation of food stocks after doomsday. Additionally, being coastal, the humidity was high, making it unlikely to lack water in the future, even if the climate returned to normal after a few years. The winter temperature in Yichuan was still higher than in most northern cities, making it relatively easier to endure. Besides the climate advantages, Yichuan also maintained a low population density, which meant fewer zombies after doomsday and relatively ample survival resources for the survivors in the city, avoiding the need to scavenge for supplies in remote areas. This made the survival base for me and my dog safer. The car stopped in front of the gate of a high-rise residential complex that stood out in the area. Seeing a middle-aged woman in a bright red down jacket standing at the gate, I hurriedly approached her and asked, "Aunt Nora, it's so cold, why didn't you wait in the car?" Aunt Nora smiled and said, "I was hoping you'd see the scenery along the way and turn back, so I could still have time to send you back in the car." Aunt Nora was the owner of the apartment I was looking at and a business partner of my mother's when she ran a supermarket. Her experience was similar to my mother's. Both left their hometowns when they were young to settle and strive with their loved ones in C province. Their experiences were also similar. After years of shared hardships with their spouses, once they made it, their partners immediately looked down on their former wives. But Aunt Nora was a bit luckier than my mom. When she was preparing for divorce, I was studying for my master's degree with Professor Harrison, whose spouse was an expert in divorce cases. Hoping for the best, Aunt Nora came to me, asking if I could help connect her. Aunt Nora was just an acquaintance of my mom's, and they had lost touch after my mom's divorce. After many years, I didn't know how she found my contact information, but to be honest, I had no obligation to help her. The way she looked at me was like someone drowning, desperately trying to clutch at a lifeline. I couldn't bear to see her end up like my mother, who devoted herself to her family for years, only to be humiliated in her marriage by her husband and outsiders due to her weaker position and concern for reputation. Fortunately, Professor Harrison gave me face and let my master take Aunt Nora's commission. Aunt Nora never expected that her desperate attempt would yield surprising results. My master fiercely defended her, securing most of the family assets and custody of the 2 children for her, allowing her to regain her dignity. Once the matter was settled, she quickly took her children and left the place of heartache, returning to her hometown in S province and settling down in the provincial capital. The house I was interested in was originally bought by Aunt Nora for her parents in Yichuan, their hometown. Unfortunately, her father fell at home 2 months ago, and the doctor said he would need a cane to walk even after recovery. Concerned, Aunt Nora had already moved her elderly parents to live with her in the provincial capital, and thus, she wanted to sell the vacant house in Yichuan. Although eager to sell the house, Aunt Nora learned of my interest and was reluctant to sell it to me. She said that even though her house was hard to sell, she didn't need to burden me with it. Despite my insistence that Yichuan had beautiful scenery, a comfortable climate, and a slow pace of life, making it a perfect retreat, she still listed a bunch of flaws trying to dissuade me. Firstly, the house was too far from the city center with inadequate infrastructure, making it inconvenient for young people. Secondly, the residential complex was indeed built under the guise of being exclusively for vacationing. But in recent years, Yichuan's tourism had declined significantly. The sales rate of the complex was very low, and the permanent population was pitifully small. As a result, the property management was negligent, hardly ever seen, making it unsafe for a young woman like me to live there alone. The more I heard, the more intrigued I became. These flaws sounded like rare advantages in a chaotic world. She reluctantly let me come to see the house, hoping I would change my mind after experiencing it firsthand. "Look, this house is on the top floor. If there's a power outage, climbing the stairs will be quite the ordeal, arriving on the 16th floor and exiting the elevator," Aunt Nora said. "One elevator serves 2 units, ours is on the left, and the one next door seems to have never been sold. Here, come in, it hasn't been cleaned for a few months, no need to change shoes, I'll show you around. The area of this unit on this floor is 120 square meters, And because it's the top floor, there's an additional attic and a terrace. Each also 120 square meters. Your grandfather chose this unfortunate house because of this terrace. See the flowers and plants the old man planted on the terrace, pretty, aren't they? His leg broke while he was working on them. The entire complex faces the sea, built on high ground 3 kilometers from the coast. Aunt Nora's building, being the tallest nearby and located on the top floor, offers strong privacy, especially if there are no drones to pry post-apocalypse. Additionally, Aunt Nora was thorough in considering her parents' needs during the house's renovation, including insulation, soundproofing, fireproofing, and waterproofing. Not only that, but the attic and terrace could also be very useful in the future. Everything was perfect, and I decided this was the one. Seeing that I was not dissuaded but even more determined, Aunt Nora finally compromised. Ava, since you've made up your mind, I won't try to dissuade you anymore. As for the price, the house was listed at $880,000 at the agency for 2 months with no one interested in viewing it. It's really hard to sell. If you buy it, you'd be doing me a big favor, so let's make it $660,000. It's true that this house isn't easy to sell, but saying it can't sell for even $880,000 is a bit of an exaggeration. I know Aunt Nora is subtly trying to repay me for connecting her with others in the past through this opportunity. However, I genuinely can't afford to be pretentious since I'm not exactly flush with cash right now, so I'll accept her kindness. Due to the tight schedule and the lack of leeway for loan procedures, getting this house at a low price is already a steal. I couldn't shamelessly ask Aunt Nora for credit, so despite the financial pinch, I chose to pay the full amount for the house in one go. During the paperwork process, Aunt Nora couldn't hold back and vented to the staff, "Can you believe the kids these days? There are so many high-value-for-money seaside properties available in Huisher High Market, and yet they insist on buying my shabby house here in Ichiwan. I really can't fathom what they're thinking." I couldn't explain my real motive for buying the house, so upon hearing this, I could only awkwardly laugh along with the staff. Yet, I couldn't help but think about Aunt Nora, Uncle Gavin and his wife, Professor Harrison and his wife, and Ms. Lynn, all kind-hearted people. They were willing to help me when I needed it. How could I repay them while keeping my secret of being reborn? Having accomplished the main task of my trip, I invited Aunt Nora to have a few drinks back at the hotel. She isn't great with alcohol and soon returned to her room to rest. As evening fell, I dressed warmly and stepped out of the hotel, following the tourist path while enduring the brisk sea breeze, guided by my phone's navigation to the nearest convenience store nearby. Halfway there, I noticed a public phone booth on the streets of Ichiwan, quaintly decorated, probably for tourists to take photos. I tried it out, and to my surprise, it worked, saving me some trouble. The road was quiet, with only the occasional passerby hurrying by with their dog. I stood in the phone booth, set up a voice changer, and dialed Emma's number. The first 3 times, the call was quickly disconnected, but it connected on the 4th attempt. However, the person on the other end remained silent, so I took the initiative and said, "Miss Emma, it's you, isn't it? I suggest you find a secluded spot. You probably wouldn't want a third person to overhear what I'm about to say." The woman's voice on the other end hesitated before asking, "Who are you? What do you want?" "Miss Emma, you ask too many questions. I hear congratulations are in order for you soon. I've come to wish you well, and also to ask a favor of you." "I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm going to hang up." Before she could finish, I interjected, "Has your boyfriend ever complimented you on how good you look with that leather silver buckle bracelet, or does he know who you met briefly in the presidential suite of the Sea Hotel under his name after your trip to H-City last month?" There was a long silence before she finally spoke, trying not to sound too angry. "Are you here to advocate for Lincoln, to speak on his behalf to the boss?" "Miss Emma, you're thinking too much. The deadline the boss set for Lincoln's family is almost upon us. I'm giving you one chance. No matter what means you use, you must completely eliminate the possibility of Lincoln's family paying their way out of trouble. His hands must be ruined, and if only his hands are ruined, then Miss Emma, this spectacular triple play you've performed won't just be for me to enjoy. Your boyfriend, the boss, and various media accounts will also receive a copy. Miss Emma, this shouldn't be too hard for you, right? How do I know you actually have what you claim?" Emma said, her teeth chattering with anger. "As long as Miss Emma can bear the risk of the video leaking, I'll randomly pick a lucky passerby soon and use their phone to send you the edited video for your verification. How does that sound? How can I trust you? What do you need to see happen to Lincoln to be satisfied, Miss Emma, other than trusting that I'll keep my promise? Do you really have any other choice? As for what needs to be done to satisfy me, leave him with just enough ability to take care of himself. As for the rest, it depends on how much Miss Emma values her career and marriage. In my previous life, Lincoln didn't actively seek my demise. He neither supported nor opposed it, merely observing in silence. Therefore, I'm not some lawless outlaw who would use this leverage to coerce Emma into murder. Besides, How could I make Lincoln truly experience the desperation of struggling to survive in an apocalyptic world if I don't leave him with his miserable life? All right, you better walk the talk, or if you make my life difficult, I will drag you down with me even in death. How will you verify the completion? Of course, we have no conflicts of interest, as long as you handle the matter well. There's no need for me to engage in a lose-lose scenario. Don't worry about the verification, just make it quick, Miss Emma. Also, be thorough and clean up after yourself. If anyone comes troubling me, I will be coming after you. Understood, Miss Emma. Beep 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 beep. Hearing the phone hang up on the other end, I buried my face in my scarf and chuckled softly. No matter how annoyed she was, Emma only dared to vent by hanging up the phone after receiving her orders. I had left the choice entirely to Emma. I bet she wouldn't give up everything she had painstakingly built. If I win the bet, it will be Lincoln's turn to taste the betrayal by someone he fully trusted. If I lose the bet, and Emma withstands the pressure, maintains her integrity, and refuses to further harm the foolish fish she had once tricked, no matter, there are plenty of ways to deal with Lincoln. Maybe I'll just be kind-hearted in this life and give Lincoln a chance to experience love in times of danger with Hannah. Lincoln, your fate depends entirely on how ruthless Emma is. By the time I returned to the hotel, it was already 9 in the evening. Just as I swiped my card to enter, I received a message from the night shift veterinarian at the pet hospital. Jojo can now stand and walk a few steps on his own. I immediately opened the surveillance app on my phone and saw the staff settling 2 puppies into their cages for the night, after ensuring they were comfortably in their spaces. The staff poured different types of freeze-dried food into their bowls as a bedtime snack, then closed the cage doors and left the surveillance area. I didn't make a sound, lying exhausted on the sofa, quietly watching them eat their late-night snack. Momo, like a vacuum cleaner, dipped its head once into its bowl, and in 3 seconds, its bowl was so clean it reflected light. Having finished, Momo watched as Jojo, on the other side, delicately used its tongue to pick up 2 or 3 pieces at a time, chewing each mouthful 50 times. Unable to resist, Momo drifted ghost-like towards the barrier separating them, standing there with its tongue out, peeking through the gap, admiring Jojo's eating show. Jojo noticed and pushed its bowl towards the fence. Momo hesitated only for a second before reaching its paw into the bowl, trying to grab the food, unable to hold on to anything. The freeze-dried morsels slipped through the gaps of the crate, not a single piece reaching its mouth. Frustrated, Momo tried again to scoop the pieces from between the gaps and failing, it threw itself against the partition in a fit, its hooves flailing wildly as it let out a frustrated howl. I couldn't help but laugh at the monitor, shaking my head. I need to have the staff secure Jojo's food bowl on the side farthest from Momo, to prevent them from secretly scheming again and making a mess of Jojo's special diet. Hey there, which little piggy is rolling on the ground? I pressed the talk button and laughed, searching for the source of the sound. It's me, it's your sister, look up here, I continued. The 2 puppies, hearing the sound, locked onto the camera, tilting their heads in confusion, though their tails had already begun to wag unconsciously. Momo, I saw you trying to sneak Jojo's freeze-dried food. You shouldn't bully your brother, okay? Finally convinced it was me talking to them, Momo tucked his ears back and frantically started hopping on his hind legs, while Jojo tried to push himself up like Momo to reach the camera. This could tear his wound. I had to quickly end the call. Sister will be back in a few days. You guys need to eat well and sleep well, okay? Bye-bye. I couldn't bear to watch the pitiful look on the brothers' faces any longer, so I turned off the camera and let out a long sigh. Fortunately, I still have them. Countdown to doomsday, 24 days. Today was probably the day the boss would make his move, but I had more important things to focus on, and I wasn't particularly interested in keeping up with Lincoln's movements. I contacted the developer of my residential complex, expressing my desire to rent the unsold apartment next to mine. The staff member asked how long I wanted to rent it for, and I said, how about 10 years? She, fearing I might back out, hurriedly finalized the rental agreement for me. With 2 apartments secured, I could now safely seal off the 16th floor's fire escape and elevator hall doors before the apocalypse, turning the 2 floors into my private space. To make things clear, let's call the apartment I bought apartment A, and the one I rented next door apartment B. Without stopping, I took the floor plans and other documents for both apartments to the best renovation company in Ichiwan, presenting my needs. 1. Fully waterproof, fireproof, and soundproof apartment B. 2. Completely update the water and electrical systems in apartments A and B with the most durable materials available. 3. Reinforce the doors and windows of apartments A and B, replacing the windows with double-layered, one-way bulletproof glass. 4. Install solar and wind power systems in both apartments A and B, cover both attics with photovoltaic panels, and set up supplementary lighting inside the attics, and install sprinkler systems on both balconies. 5. Connect apartments A and B with a security door in the middle, without compromising the stability of the buildings. Also, demolish the wall between the 2 upper balconies. 6. Install a rainwater collection and filtration system on each balcony. One with a large capacity for coarse filtering linked to an irrigation system for future cultivation, and another with a smaller capacity for fine filtering connected to the indoor water pipes to meet the daily needs of me and my dogs. When inspecting my property, the project manager from the renovation company curiously asked why I wanted these changes. I casually mentioned my plan to create a boutique eco-friendly guest house by the sea with a stunning urban garden on the rooftop terrace, using purified rainwater and clean energy, hitting right at the eco-conscious crowd's sweet spot. He nodded without surprise, believing me. The company had a good reputation, and the quoted price was fair. Since there was no need for preliminary effect drawings for the renovations I requested, the project manager promised that all work would be completed and ready for inspection within 10 days. We immediately went back to his office to sign the contract. After leaving the renovation company, I considered my mission for this trip complete. Eagerly, I booked a high-speed train ticket back to Provency. While on my way back to the hotel, after a quick wash at the hotel, I collapsed onto the bed, exhausted, and closed my eyes, reminiscing about my previous life. In my last life, just a few days after the apocalypse began, the water and electricity systems collapsed due to lack of maintenance. With no water or electricity, the survivors in the supermarket could initially maintain a certain standard of living thanks to the ample stock. Relations among people remained relatively harmonious. However, soon due to the persistently high temperatures, food quickly began to spoil and deteriorate. Even products with a 3-year shelf life didn't last long before the onslaught of the undead. The competition for survival resources intensified the conflicts among the survivors in the supermarket. And the result of these conflicts was that these precious resources were ultimately monopolized by a group led by Gabriel, who had no qualms about killing zombies, controlled by scum who would stoop to any dirty trick to use against their peers. Other survivors, including Uncle Gavin and his wife, as well as I, who were seen as thorns in the side by the Gabriel's family, had no choice but to rely on catching geckos and insects hidden among the dense ivy leaves for protein, all while constantly guarding against being bullied and humiliated by that group of scum for their amusement. Thinking back, Lincoln's betrayal was not entirely unforeseen. In dire times, manners and morals are often the first to be forsaken. With Lincoln suffering from stomach issues, it only made sense for him to leverage his still valuable reputation to secure a better position and a more comfortable life while he could. If given another chance at life, I wouldn't let myself get trapped in the Georgia arena again. I just needed to be well prepared, live quietly and inconspicuously with my dog, and simply wait to see their downfall. And to live quietly for a long time, one must plan ahead. Although our new home in Ichuan has geographical advantages with its own water and electricity supply, making it more comfortable than before at Georgia, this damned apocalypse won't end quickly. Food stores will eventually run out, so before that day comes, I must be capable of growing and breeding my own food to ensure a stable supply for me and my dog. Therefore, I need to carefully plan how to use the limited space in the attic and on the terrace. I got up and picked up my phone to call a former client. He was an agricultural broker who owned his own farm and orchard. I got straight to the point, telling him about my plans to create a self-sustaining small farm in my backyard, outlining my general needs and the usable area of the yard. I asked him to draft a preliminary farming and breeding plan based on his experience, then draw up a complete shopping list. After discussing and adjusting the plan, he would help me purchase all the necessary materials. He agreed promptly, promising to send me the plan and list as soon as possible. Apocalypse countdown, 23 days. I contacted an acquaintance working in the medical system of Provency to check if there were any hospital records for Lincoln in the area. The reply came quickly. Lincoln was indeed in the People's Hospital of Provency. Coincidentally, Aunt Abigail worked at the same hospital. The last time I met with Uncle Gavin, we had agreed to have a meal together when time allowed. However, due to Jojo's hospitalization and my travel plans to Ichuan, the meal had been delayed. On my way to the provincial capital's high-speed train station, I got in touch with Uncle Gavin. At his insistence, we agreed to have dinner at his place the following evening. During the call, I also asked Aunt Abigail to discreetly gather some information on Lincoln's condition. Just as I entered the high-speed train station and was about to have my ticket checked, I received the document from the broker. Upon reviewing it, I couldn't help but appreciate that professional tasks should indeed be handled by professionals. His document was divided into two main sections: cultivation and breeding. The cultivation section included not only various seeds, seedlings, common fungi culture packs, and their planting specifications, but also paired tools, small agricultural machinery, and even pollination solutions, including a box of bees and potential self-composting needs, listing all the necessary supplies for vermicomposting. The breeding section was similar, including appropriate cages, ready-made feed, mealworms, pasture seeds, common veterinary drugs, and medical equipment, and even a small home feed machine I hadn't anticipated. The list of video learning materials and reference books was also extensive. The broker's list was nearly perfect in my eyes, requiring only minor adjustments for the apocalyptic environment. I discussed a few points with him. 1. The primary criteria for selecting crops should be ease of cultivation, followed by yield and palatability. We need to screen out any overly delicate varieties from the list since they won't survive the harsh conditions of the apocalypse. 2. Besides perennial plants and seeds with a shelf life of over 5 years, it's best to choose varieties that can be reseeded. Otherwise, in a few years, if my seeds have expired or degenerated, I'll face the dilemma of having no seeds to plant. 3. For fruit trees, opt for moderately yielding potted plants, adding storage-resistant tropical fruits like mango, passion fruit, and durian. Considering the post-apocalyptic high temperatures and the humidity at Ichuan, the apple, jujube, and pear trees on the broker's list might not survive as well as these tropical natives. 4. Replace chickens and ducks in the poultry list with pigeons, quails, and guinea fowls. Chickens and ducks are too noisy. Their calls might as well be an invitation for other survivors to come and dine at my place, a risk I cannot afford. 5. Increase the purchase amount of all living supplies by 50% in the last life. About 1/3 of humanity perished in the initial days of the temperature rise. I worry that if my reserves of crops and livestock aren't large enough, they won't withstand the natural selection that will occur. The broker had no objections to most adjustments, but he repeatedly advised me, tropical fruit trees are not easy to grow in Ichuan. I'm worried that after all the effort of bringing the seedlings over from 1,000 miles away, it might all end up being for nothing. All I can say is, Big Brother, please make sure the quality is good. I will handle the rest myself. Big Brother reluctantly agreed. Since my requests were varied, Big Brother mentioned that he didn't have immediate access to things like the newly added tropical fruit trees and small birds, and it would take some time to gather everything. Fortunately, I was not in a hurry. I still had many things to handle in Province, and Jojo couldn't be discharged from the hospital very soon. It was expected that it would take another 10 days before I could move to Ichuan with the dogs and supplies. The deal went smoothly, mainly because of the mutual trust in my professional influence and Big Brother's trust in my ability to pay. I paid a deposit, and the rest was out of my hands. I just had to wait for Big Brother to deliver to Ichuan in 15 days and then pay the remaining amount. After ending the conversation, the high-speed train arrived just in time, and I headed straight to the pet hospital. Chapter 6, Handling Matters in Province. As I pushed open the hospital doors, I saw Momo being held down on the examination table, lying flat and waiting obediently for the doctor to vaccinate it. Jojo was initially standing by, but the moment he caught sight of me out of the corner of his eye, he rushed towards me energetically like a lion shaking its mane. Hearing the commotion, Momo, still pressed down, twisted its head to look and instantly wriggled free from the doctor's grasp, darting off the table with such speed that it left a blur, and then suddenly yelped as it fell off the table. The doctor hurried to check if it was hurt, but Momo quickly got up, its short legs skidding across the tile floor as it scrambled towards Jojo and me, crashing into my arms. I fell to the ground laughing, shouting their names. The two brothers circled around me wagging their tails, Jojo excitedly licking my face, and seeing this, Momo, not to be outdone, climbed onto my leg and, like a little cannonball, jumped up to lick my chin. I laughed and dodged, shrinking my neck and wiping my face with a scarf, controlling one dog with each hand, vigorously rubbing their heads and messing them up. Once the excitement of our reunion subsided, Momo calmed down, while I held up one of Jojo's legs to check his belly wound. Mr. Drag sat to the side, giving me sideways glances. Whenever our eyes met, he would throw his head back and howl mournfully as if he were pointing out my irresponsibility in abandoning the puppies. Feeling guilty, I poured each brother a large bowl of freeze-dried food, but Jojo lay next to me on the floor, looking up with unmoving eyes, and Momo continued to grumble, neither dog willing to eat the food I offered. The doctor, watching the drama unfold with arms crossed, suggested, "Jojo can walk now. Why don't you take them out for a bit to clear their minds? No puppy can resist a trip outside, and by the time they come back, they'll have forgotten all about being mad." So, I went with the flow and took them for a walk around the hospital. Jojo stuck close to my legs, strolling leisurely, while Momo pulled on the leash, plowing ahead. At each intersection, they always wanted to go in different directions, but since Mr. Drag was stubborn, if things didn't go his way, he would loudly bray. So Jojo always gave in, and I was forced to follow the route Mr. Drag insisted on until I worried Jojo couldn't keep up and had to carry Momo, forcing a return. The doctor was right. After their outing, the two little guys were back on good terms with me, though it wore Jojo and me out. Contrasted by Momo's constant barrage of noise, I realized Jojo was always very quiet. Thinking back, I couldn't recall ever hearing Jojo bark After serving dinner to the dogs and watching them devour it hungrily, I went to the office to find Jojo's lead surgeon and asked, "Doctor, is there something wrong with Jojo's vocal cords? Why doesn't it ever make a sound?" The doctor stroked his chin, reminisced for a moment, and after reviewing Jojo's medical records, he confidently responded, "There are no structural damages. Perhaps Jojo is just a quiet, handsome fellow." At this moment, the handsome fellow and the loud donkey had just finished their dinner and were napping beside me. Jojo was so sleepy that he was swaying, his eyes rolling back involuntarily, yet he stubbornly refused to close them and lie down. Momo, on the other hand, was sprawled out, belly exposed, softly snoring as though asleep. However, when I stealthily leaned over to look at his face, I noticed his eyes were still open. Startled, Mr. Tua suddenly sat up, and Jojo wasn't sleepy anymore. The two of them stared at me with eyes as if they were guarding against thieves, facing the two dogs that completely trusted and relied on me. It was hard to bear, but ultimately, I had to leave the hospital under their reluctant gaze and Momo's grumbling. During my last days in Province, I had a packed schedule, inevitably leaving early and returning late. If they were discharged and came home with me, they wouldn't receive the best care. So it was better for them to stay at the hospital. Once we move to Ichuan, everything will get better. Countdown to the apocalypse, 22 days. I visited 2 banks and secured a credit loan of 200,000 each. Later, through a friend's referral, I enrolled in a vocational tech college locally, signing up for courses in welding, electrical installation, and appliance repair. The courses promised hands-on, one-on-one training, aiming for broad knowledge rather than perfection, and I also ordered some common tools and materials from the school. I withdrew nearly 20,000 from my Housing Provident Fund and went to the most renowned cosmetic institution in the province, under the name Hannah. I opened a card and topped it up with 10,000. After leaving the institution, I found a nearby barber shop and got my long hair, which I wouldn't have time to manage in the future, cut short. Then I hurried home, loaded the gifts I had prepared for Uncle Gavin's family into the car, and parked at their residential complex right on the scheduled time. Uncle Gavin was chatting with the doorman in the guardroom. Seeing me, he immediately came over to help with the bags, chiding me for spending too much. Following behind Uncle Gavin, I observed that this was an old-style government staff residential complex, and the only doorman was an elderly man. Uncle Gavin's front door, like most of his neighbors, was an old wooden door that had weathered many years. Their home was just over 40 square meters. Although tidy and clean, it felt cramped. Aunt Abigail, a woman of few words, had prepared dinner. The table was so full that adding another set of chopsticks seemed impossible, but from this lavish spread, I could feel their sincere welcome. The table featured impressive main dishes as well as simple home cooking. The presentation clearly wasn't the work of one person. I guess the special dishes were likely bought from a restaurant by Uncle Gavin and Aunt Abigail. Uncle and Aunt Abigail didn't touch the dishes they bought much, focusing instead on serving their daughter and me with the public chopsticks. As we ate, we made awkward small talk. I casually started topics, and they tried hard to keep the conversation going, their efforts both clumsy and genuine. Aunt Abigail mentioned what she had heard about Lincoln, that young man. Oh, both his hands suffered crush fractures, the bones can't support the flesh, and his hands are soft like putty. With proper care, there's still hope. Also, the left side of his face, including the scalp near his temple, somehow got burned. Even after recovery, he will have scars. He's tall and looks like a celebrity. Really such a shame. Oh, and his mother is also in our hospital. She lost a tooth, and her tailbone is fractured. She can't move in her bed. Both mother and son don't have relatives to care for them, and it seems they don't have much money, nor have they hired a professional caregiver. Emma still went ahead with her decision. She probably thought that someone wanted to use her to give a hard time to those who thrive solely on their looks, and ruining their source of income would be more satisfying than breaking a few of their bones. Not only that, she even went as far as to send Lincoln's mother to the hospital as well, showing no fear of pushing Lincoln and his mother to the brink and having a showdown with her. Seeing that I didn't respond, Aunt Abigail studied my expression and added, "Ava, do you know this young man? I see that he and his mother are quite pitiful. Would you like me to take care of them for a while? You don't have to pay me. I can easily help them out. A young person unable to manage their household, am neither capable nor deserving of their cautious and serious treatment. This is the good karma my mother has built for me, her legacy." While pretending to drink tea, I tilted my head back to blink away the tears in my eyes, set down the cup, and said, "No need, Aunt Abigail. I don't know them. I was just inquiring for a friend. I came here mainly to ask Uncle Gavin for help with 2 things. After Uncle Gavin took his daughter back to her room and closed the door, I took out 50,000 yuan in cash that I had prepared earlier, placed it on the table. explained my request to Uncle Gavin, and clarified that this money was only part of the payment, with an additional 100,000 to be paid upon completion of the task. After listening to me, Uncle Gavin and Aunt Abigail exchanged a look, their expressions both complex and intriguing. The favor I asked for, by their simple values, wasn't illegal. And given Uncle Gavin's position as the security chief at Georgia, it wasn't difficult to accomplish either, but from their expressions, they might have thought I was about to engage in aggressive tactics like seizing company seals or appropriating properties, worried that helping me could jeopardize Uncle Gavin's job. I couldn't help but laugh and said, "Uncle Gavin, Aunt Abigail, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. What do I need those inanimate things for, Uncle Gavin? Just do as I say, and I can assure you that Gabriel won't find out, and there won't be any trouble in the future, rest assured. When the apocalypse comes, so many people will die at the hands of zombies that no one will notice one more or one less." And Abigail stared thoughtfully at the tablecloth, still seemingly hesitant, but Uncle Gavin quickly withdrew his gaze from his daughter's room, looked at me, and agreed to my request. On the way to the car, Uncle Gavin hesitated several times to speak, but finally, as I opened the car door, he said, "Ava, Uncle Gavin might not be in a position to say this. I know you hold grudges, and I support you reclaiming what rightfully belongs to you and your mother, but we just hope you won't put yourself at risk. Be careful, okay?" Under the streetlight, looking at his face not yet marred by the pain of losing a daughter to the zombies, I replied, "Okay, Uncle Gavin, I'll be careful, don't worry about me, and you and Aunt Abigail take it easy, take care of your health." Uncle Gavin had told me in his past life, on the day the apocalypse arrived, he and his wife were at work while their daughter was home alone, but when they rushed home with all their might, they found their front door wide open and several zombies feasting on their beloved daughter. They crazily fought off the zombies, but still couldn't save the life of their daughter, whom they had cherished for half a lifetime. Later, we almost simultaneously sought refuge at Georgia. At that time, the supermarket had gathered quite a few survivors, a part of whom, bold enough, had already cleared the zombies and bodies from the supermarket using the cover of the growing vines. We latecomers, seen as opportunists by them, were never well received, even though our association with the Gabriel's family got us accepted. Struggling to fend for themselves, Uncle Gavin and Aunt Abigail could find very little food from their surroundings, yet whenever they managed to gather something, they would save some and secretly give it to me. I knew that their care for me was largely due to transference. Having lost their daughter to tragedy, they couldn't help but soothe themselves by treating me, the daughter of an old friend facing hardships, as their own child for comfort. After the Gabriel's family pushed me into the midst of the disaster, I watched as the crowd dispersed, with only Uncle Gavin and his wife looking back at me with tears in their eyes. No one else stayed for me. Uncle Gavin and Aunt Abigail didn't try to save me. We all understood that ultimately, I was not their biological daughter whom they would risk their lives to protect, but I will forever be grateful for their kindness. In this life, I want to do my best to help their family of 3 survive together. Living not far from Gabriel and his family, I confirmed he was home and then visited him, carrying a men's cashmere sweater and a newly acquired medical beauty card. The cashmere sweater was something I had a tailor make on the day of my rebirth, and though I had just received it today, it didn't stop me from casually saying to Gabriel, "Dad, you've kept in good shape, hardly any different from before. This sweater was made according to the size of your old clothes at home. Why don't you try it on and see if it fits? If not, I can take it back for alterations." Gabriel was somewhat flattered by my gesture, subtly sizing me up. These past few days, I had been incredibly busy, with dark circles under my eyes and an overall look of exhaustion. I had even cut my long hair that I had kept for many years. Perhaps in his eyes, I perfectly fit the image of a once pretentiously aloof daughter who, now desperate and out of options, had come back to lower her stance and try to please her wealthy biological father. Thus, Gabriel, somewhat proudly, tried on the cashmere sweater and generously complimented my thoughtfulness. I then handed him the medical beauty card, making an embarrassed and awkward gesture, and lowered my head as I said, "Aunt Hannah has also been worried about my situation. This card is for her. She can use it by providing her phone number." Gabriel was surprised by the gift, which even included his mistress, and sighed, "Ah, child, you've finally grown up after experiencing life. When your mother and I had our issues, you were too young to understand. Sanctifying some things and taking others too seriously. Now that your mother is gone and my husband has been imprisoned, it's time to let go of some unnecessary burdens. We are your family too. Don't be so distant, turning yourself into a lonely soul. You know." I turned my face away, biting my lip in embarrassment, and nodded in agreement, but in my heart, I thought, let him have his opinions. As long as he's happy with the sugared bullets, he's a good target. Countdown to the apocalypse. 14 days. The past 10 days have been uneventful. During this period, the renovation company completed all work on time and notified me to inspect the new house. Before setting off, I ordered 10 freezers from different e-commerce platforms, scheduled their delivery to my new home, rented a refrigerated van, and drove to the new house myself, transferring all supplies from the cold storage to the freezers at home. Upon returning from the trip, I was either studying at a vocational college or busy spending money. Most supplies could be purchased online at better prices and could be paid for using credit facilities like installment payments, alleviating my financial pressure. However, for items only accessible through special channels, such as weapons and armor for dealing with humans and zombies, I had to use personal contacts and run around myself. While bulk purchasing consumables, I also didn't forget to ask internet cafes to help download games, books, films, and electronic recipes for entertainment post-apocalypse onto hard drives. After this period of frenzied shopping, the warehouse was restocked with a plethora of supplies, although the new home was equipped with solar and wind power systems. To prepare for unexpected situations, I've added 3 portable quiet diesel generators, 10 outdoor storage batteries, and 20 power banks as backups for Momo and Jojo. I've stocked up on canned and freeze-dried dog food, common medications, nutritional supplements, toys, grooming kits, sun protective clothing, down jackets, and just in case, enough cat litter. I've equipped myself with moisture-wicking, quick-drying, warm clothing, windproof down jackets, fleece-lined hiking boots, and thermal blankets, all capable of withstanding temperatures as low as -40 degrees Celsius. I've purchased a year's supply of freeze-dried fruits and vegetables that both the dogs and I can eat. I've gathered a variety of common prescription and non-prescription drugs from multiple online and offline sources and stored them all. These new supplies seem substantial, but in reality, I spent just one night repacking them into large, unmarked cardboard boxes, neatly organizing them alongside the supplies brought from Gabriel. Countdown to doomsday, 13 days. As of last night, Jojo and Momo have been at the pet hospital for a full 14 days. Jojo's wounds have mostly healed, and his weight has quickly increased from 32 kilograms at admission to 40 kilograms. Though still thin, he is considered quite healthy according to the medical checks at the front desk. I was settling the bills for their treatment and boarding, dressed in down jackets, thinking I still owed money and was ready to pay with the barcode on my phone, only to be told there was a surplus of $2,000 in my account. Let me check. The front desk clerk fiddled with the system for a bit, then said, "It shows here that on the day Jojo was admitted, Ms. Lynn, the owner of the Alaskan dog that donated blood to Jojo, had deposited $3,000 into Jojo's account." I was momentarily stunned. Ms. Lynn had not only brought her pet to save Jojo's life, but had also secretly covered part of his treatment costs. There really are more good people in the world than bad. Watching Jojo stick out his tongue and smile, I couldn't help but smile too. The first thing I did when I brought the dogs home was to give them a bath. I had tolerated these 2 dirty dogs for too long, especially Momo, who had grown up scavenging from trash, probably only ever getting rained on and never having had a proper bath. As I filled the bathtub, Momo and Jojo lay side by side at the bathroom door watching me. I decided to wash Momo first since he was smaller and had shorter fur, which would likely make the process easier. After filling the tub halfway, I turned off the tap and reached for Momo. Momo relaxed completely as I lifted him by the armpits, stretching out long. However, as soon as his paws touched the water, he stiffened into a whirlwind of panic, struggling to escape the dreaded pool while looking up at me with pleading eyes, trying to burrow into my arms. Having barely wet his feet and already frightening him, I carried him out of the bathroom and set him down in the living room. Once on the floor, Momo didn't look back. He scurried around, seeking a hiding spot, and aimed for a narrow gap under the coffee table, not ducking his head. He thudded his head against the wooden base with a loud thunk, sounding like a woodblock. Both Jojo and I were stunned, but the fearless little guy didn't seem to feel any pain. Without pausing, he wriggled into the gap, leaving behind a trail of wet paw prints on the wooden floor. I decided to let Momo calm down on his own, patted Jojo on the back, and led him to the tub. Jojo cooperated well, jumping into the tub to enjoy the warm water, allowing me to scrub him down. Although Jojo was relatively clean, the water quickly turned dark. During a break to change the water, we spotted Momo's sneaky little head. He lay by the door, tongue out, head tilted, puzzled and watching his brother's blissful expression. This time when I went to fetch him, he resisted less, but I didn't put him directly into the water. Instead, I placed him on the reclining Jojo's back and then left him there, supporting Jojo's chin while washing his face. Momo realized that water wasn't so scary after all, quickly getting distracted by a rubber duck floating on the surface. It jumped off Jojo's back on its own and started nudging the duck around with its nose. Getting the 2 brothers cleaned up was a struggle, and drying them with a blow dryer was yet another challenge. As soon as the blow dryer turned on, Momo would pout, look up, and howl loudly, competing with the dryer to see who could be louder. This triggered memories from my past life just before I died. In my past life, I had dared to shout loudly surrounded by zombies, not sure whether it was because it felt protected or was just clueless about danger. Thinking ahead, I must start correcting its habit of shouting from now on. I raised my left index finger to my lips, making a shushing sound, while my right hand gently pinched its small snout. Momo, thinking I was playing, instantly forgot about howling. It wagged its tail, pushing its mouth up, trying to lick my face and plead for mercy, but as soon as I let go and it noticed the roar of the dryer again, it couldn't help but start crying out. Just as I was about to shush it again, Jojo, who had been silently observing, suddenly dipped its head and engulfed Momo's noisy head in its mouth. Confused, Momo tried to pull its head out, and as it moved, Jojo let go, a bit annoyed. Momo squinted and raised its head, howling discontentedly at Jojo. Jojo faced Momo, but its eyes looked towards me. I tentatively raised my finger to my lips again, and Jojo immediately got the message, once again engulfing Momo's head in its mouth. Jojo was very patient. After doing this a couple of times, it no longer needed my cue. As soon as Momo started howling, it would open its mouth and effectively wear Momo down to a resigned and quiet acceptance of my grooming. After tidying up the two dogs, I gave Jojo a large cheese stick and a smaller one to Momo, sending them off to their luxurious dog bed to chew on their treats while I went to clean the bathroom and freshen up. When I came out of the bathroom, they were waiting at the door as if they hadn't seen me in ages, cheese sticks in their mouths, whining excitedly and aggrievedly through their noses, circling around me with their tails whipping me occasionally like windshield wipers, exhausted and barely able to keep my eyes open. I managed to respond to the brothers' enthusiasm before heading straight to bed, ready to sleep. Unfortunately, a call from Lincoln popped up on my phone. Just like his mother, he couldn't rest easy and chose the time I was about to sleep to bother me, but I was surprised Lincoln could hold back for so long. It had been several days since he regained his freedom, and yet he only now came to confront me, much more patient than I had expected. Ava, I've known you for nearly 20 years, and I just found out how cold-hearted you are. Now that my hand is broken and my face is ruined, are you pleased with yourself for getting rid of the burden early? Why aren't you speaking? Do you feel guilty? Do you even feel guilt anymore? After your mom died, my mom and I treated you like family, Ava, and this is how you repay us when disaster strikes. No wonder your dad didn't want you when they divorced. He was smarter than us. He saw through your true nature early on. You're cold-hearted. Hearing this, I couldn't help but interrupt his illogical rant. Enough. You're not here just to vent your emotions. Let's get to the point. What do you want? Only the sound of his hurried and heavy breathing, like bellows, could be heard through the receiver. He was silenced by anger for at least 2 minutes before he darkly said, "Give me 1 million. You don't want to sell the house your mother left you? Fine, I won't force you. I just want 1 million, which is merely a year or two of your earnings, Ava. I know you can afford it. Once you give me that, you won't owe me anything. Consider it severing our ties over the years." I was almost amused by his ludicrous reasoning, claiming compensation for lost youth. That's quite novel, but 1 million is just a pipe dream. For enlightening me, I'll give you 200,000. Unable to contain his rage, Lincoln's voice emerged through clenched teeth, almost pausing at every word. Lawyer Ava, I'll compromise further. 500,000. Not a penny less. You understand the importance of leaving some leeway for future encounters, don't you? If you're so reluctant to part with that small amount of money, don't blame me for showing up at your home and law firm every day, commuting with you, and passionately pursuing you again in front of your colleagues and neighbors. Consider what's more important, the money, or your reputation as a woman and a lawyer. I advise you to think it over. I initially wanted to make light of his absurd behavior, but his despicable nature left me completely disinterested. Why waste words with someone who's practically a dead man walking, mimicking him? I also fell silent for 2 minutes before speaking ominously. Give me some time to liquidate assets. 5 days. I'll bring the money to you in 5 days. Lincoln threw a few more harsh words before hanging up. I leaned back on the headboard, lost in thought. I suspected that with Emma stirring up trouble this lifetime, Boss's reactions were different from the last. He probably took the money but didn't spare the cruelty, which is why Lincoln and his mother couldn't even afford a caretaker and had resorted to calling me after so many days, likely struggling to pay for hospital bills. 5 days later, I was already at the nursing home, with Lincoln's hand injured and his mother's coccyx not easily healed. They were nearly penniless and mistakenly clung to the lifeline I had casually thrown them. Besides raging impotently at the hospital, what else could these two do? They weren't worth my concern anymore. When I snapped back to reality, I noticed the 2 little dogs had been quietly sitting by the bed, watching over me, with 2 cheese sticks carelessly thrown beside the bed. Perhaps alarmed by the tone of my earlier phone call, it was the first time I saw them looking timid yet concerned. I smiled and clapped my hands at them, and the very empathetic puppies instantly relaxed. Twisting like freshly unearthed worms, Momo stood on his hind legs with his front paws on the edge of my bed, and polite Jojo on either side, both grinning and panting with a similarly pitiful look, pleading with me, all right, do you just want to sleep on the bed? Is there a dog in the world that doesn't want to be close to its owner? There isn't, quickly capitulating under their silent assault. I tucked an arm around each fragrant pup, enjoying the continuous warmth of 2 little heaters through the blanket, and fell into a deep sleep. Countdown to doomsday, 12 days. I hadn't drawn the curtains last night, and early this morning, daylight struck my face directly. Squinting in, snuggled in the warm bedding, I couldn't bring myself to get up. Half asleep, I thought I saw Jojo jump off the bed, followed by Momo stepping on its back to get down too. The 2 puppies left the room, and the house was eerily quiet. I wondered if they were up to some mischief. Once I was fully awake, I sat up and saw the brothers quietly playing with a tug toy by the bed. They immediately got up and wagged their tails, nudging my hand. I petted each dog's head, in a good mood, and took them out for a walk. Then, while eating the breakfast I brought back, I watched over the brothers to make sure Jojo didn't let his younger brother eat his food. After settling the dogs, I rushed out to attend the last day of my class at the vocational college. As the class was about to end, I suddenly received a call from Uncle Gavin asking to meet up. He chose a famous dessert shop for the meeting, and I arrived there first. When Uncle Gavin entered, looking travel-worn, I was in the middle of ordering with the waiter, asking them to pack 2 of the shop's signature afternoon tea sets. Uncle Gavin sat down without interrupting me, nodding as he took off his thick coat. Once the waiter left, I greeted him with a smile. Uncle Gavin, I remember my mom mentioned that your family loves sweets. This shop's chocolate lava cake is quite popular. Try it and see if it suits your taste. Uncle Gavin eagerly replied, Sure, I'll try it. However, he didn't reach for his fork and knife, but instead awkwardly rubbed his hands together, turned around, and pulled something out of his coat pocket to hand to me. I took a closer look and saw it was the envelope I had given him during my last visit to his house. Was this a sign of regret, not wanting to help me anymore? Seeing my reaction, Uncle Gavin quickly put the envelope on the table and pushed it towards me, starting to explain, These past days, your aunt and I have given it some thought, and we can't accept this money. Your mom probably didn't tell you, but back when we left the village with our daughter, speaking only our local dialect and not understanding or speaking Mandarin, someone from our village took us to work at a construction site, promising good earnings. We worked hard for most of the year, but when it came time to get paid at the end of the year, the contractor took off with the money. We didn't have a penny on us, no way to get back home, and couldn't stay at the construction site either. We ended up living under a bridge for nearly half a month with our daughter, and we were almost tricked into working in an illegal coal mine. By chance, someone mentioned that your mom, a fellow villager, was running a big supermarket in the city. I swallowed my pride and asked her for a loan of 200 yuan to buy bus tickets back to the village. Unexpectedly, your mom took pity on us. She not only lent us the money but also arranged good jobs for both your aunt and me. In the early years when our daughter was young and needed constant care, your mom knew your aunt mainly worked day shifts at the hospital, so she arranged for me to work night shifts at a warehouse to ensure one of us was always there for our daughter. We're not capable of much, and for all these years, we've been living under your mom's kindness without a chance to repay her. Now that she's gone, and you came to ask Uncle Gavin for a little help. Yet we were about to take your money. We'd be shameless, unable to face her again. The waiter came over and placed the packaged meals I ordered on the table. Seeing this, Uncle Gavin turned his face away and wiped his reddened eyes with his sleeve. Once the waiter left, he pushed the envelope towards me again and said, Ava, please take this back. Uncle Gavin finally has a chance to repay your mother. Consider it a full return of favor. Feeling a lump in my throat, I didn't look at the tears in the eyes of this middle-aged man, staring at his worn sweater with a fraying shoulder. I said, All right, then I'll shamelessly accept your kindness on behalf of my mom. As I prepared to leave, I picked up the packed bag on the table and handed it to Uncle Gavin. This is for your wife and daughter. Take it home for them to enjoy something sweet. He received it with a surprised and grateful smile. For them. They've never had such fine cakes before. I thank you on their behalf, Ava. Uncle Gavin's home was close by, and he declined my offer to drive him back. Sitting in my car, as I watched him walk away, this middle-aged man, who tends to humble himself in front of the slightly more respectable upper class, was dressed in worn but clean clothes. He carefully carried a delicate handbag that seemed out of place with him, resembling an old fishing boat joyfully returning to its warm harbor with a full load. He may not be able to provide a wealthy material life for his wife and daughter, but I believe that every member of his family must be happy. I sincerely hope that they continue to be happy. Countdown to the end of days, 11 days. After intermittently finishing a 10-day course, it meant I could start preparing to move. First, I had to deal with my car. In the post-apocalyptic world, I might not go out much. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't need a fuel-driven car. Instead of letting it gather dust in the garage, it's better to sell it and rent a vehicle more suitable for stockpiling and transporting goods later on. The company that bought my car last time was quite fair. I went there knowing the ropes, traded in my car that I had fully paid for and had driven for less than 2 months, and got $250,000 in return. I then rented an almost new SUV. While I was busy packing at home, I received an invitation to join a family dinner at the Gabriel's family's house. It's quite funny, Gabriel seemed very willing to welcome me into his new family, yet he completely ignored the fact that my so-called husband was in prison and that I was running a supermarket alone. I had been worried that he might take my change of heart seriously and discover before the apocalypse that I had lied to him. But it turned out I was worrying over nothing. Though I found such pointless activities quite distasteful, I happened to have something to give to Hannah, so I made time to go. Packing is physically demanding, and I was starving. Sitting at the Gabriel's family's dining table, I treated the challenging remarks of Hannah and her daughter as meaningless noise and focused solely on eating. Once I was full, I put down my chopsticks, pulled a concert ticket from my bag, and handed it to Hannah. Hannah initially dismissed it, but when she saw that it was a front-row ticket for her favorite boy band's tour in Province, she jumped up and screamed with joy. "How did you get a front-row ticket?" I had several friends try to get them for me, and they couldn't. Her words were cut off by her mother's deadly glare. I ignored their silent exchange and said goodbye to Gabriel before leaving. It's not that I had come all this way and couldn't lower my face to play along with their harmonious family facade. Given my previous attitude towards this family, giving them gifts was suspicious enough. If I had appeared even more obsequious, they would have suspected my intentions. If they became guarded against me, wouldn't that waste my goodwill? It's better this way, and it also saves me some effort. Chapter 7, Heading North. Countdown to the end of days, 10 days. I had compared the quotes from freight and long-distance moving companies, and they weren't much different. Considering that using a freight service would require finding reliable temporary workers to help move things upstairs once they arrived, I decided to simply choose a moving company for a more permanent solution. I had already moved the more valuable items in the warehouse into the rented SUV. The 6 men from the moving company efficiently loaded the rest into 2 large trucks, carrying our hopes of surviving the apocalypse. It was time for us to set off. I returned home and carefully imprinted every corner of the house into my memory. Years might pass before I know if my dogs and I can survive to see the end of the apocalypse, and I wonder if there's any chance of returning to this place in the remainder of my life. After saying a final farewell to the house that held my memories from childhood, I gently closed the door. Hearing the smart lock beep, door locked, I turned around, carrying a backpack with my mother's photos and mementos, and led my 2 puzzled puppies toward our uncertain future. This was my 3rd time driving this route to Ichan in Province, and I was quite familiar with it. At each red light, I peeked at the puppies in the rearview mirror to see what they were up to. Most of the time, they were intently watching the various vehicles and pedestrians outside the window. Curious, sometimes, Momo, bored, would try to climb to the front to play with me. But as a driver who strictly follows the rules, I wouldn't entertain it, and it would have to go back to its brother, bumping its head against him. Jojo knew exactly what it was doing. It was looking for trouble, so Jojo would purposely open its mouth wide and gently clamp Momo's body with its teeth, suddenly knocking Momo down. The excitement would make Teacher Doing jump up, eagerly waiting for another playful tackle from its brother. Just like I don't understand why children enjoy those little rocking rides at supermarket entrances. I'm equally puzzled by why the 2 dogs find the repetitive action of knocking each other down so amusing, yet they could play this game tirelessly for a long time. Not long after entering the territory of the eastern 3 provinces, I spotted a yin brother and sister duo setting up a stall between 2 small towns on a national highway. Their stall was located at an abandoned intercity bus platform. Feeling a bit hungry, I conveniently parked next to the platform, secured my backpack with valuables, dressed the dogs in their down jackets, and walked over to see what the siblings were selling. The bags on the ground were filled with forest products like hazel mushrooms, chestnuts, red dates, pine nuts, and hazelnuts, all surprisingly well presented. I asked the brother if I could try the pine nuts and hazelnuts. He didn't speak, just gave me a simple, honest smile, bent down, and grabbed a handful from each bag to offer me. I quickly put my hands behind my back, saying, "Oh, that's too much. Just a couple of each to taste will do." He continued to smile and extended his hand, insisting I take them, while giving Momo a pine cone to play with. The little girl watching in amusement finally spoke. "Sister, my brother can't talk. He wants you to try them, no charge." Hearing this, I felt even more reluctant to reach out, but the girl stood up from the bench, took the dried fruits from her brother's hand, and put them directly into mine, saying, "Sister, try them. These are all from our family's forest back home. Don't worry if they're not to your taste, but if you like them, feel free to buy some." Unable to refuse, I took off my gloves, cracked open a pine nut, and popped it into my mouth. My eyes lit up instantly. They were delicious, richer, and more aromatic than any I'd tasted before. I definitely had to buy some. I glanced at the prices marked on various forest goods. Most were even 20% lower than those in supermarkets. After the siblings agreed, I sampled from deeper inside each packet to ensure the quality was consistent throughout, with no adulteration. It seemed they had transported the goods on an old bicycle parked nearby. The total wasn't much. I estimated less than 100 kilograms, so I told the siblings I'd take everything they had on the stall. The little girl jumped with joy, asking, "Really, sister, are you sure you can eat that much?" I replied, "Absolutely. I'll keep some for myself and send the rest to friends. Actually, what you have here isn't even enough to share. Do you have more stock at home?" Her brother used sign language, and she translated, "We have plenty more, but it would take at least an hour and a half to go back and bring them here. Put your bike in my trunk, and you can ride back with me to get it." "Okay." Upon hearing this, the girl looked at her brother, who thought for a moment and then nodded in agreement. Following the girl's directions, I drove to a fork in the road and stopped. She told me the road ahead was too narrow for my car and to wait there while they went to get more goods. She asked me to remember her brother's phone number. I agreed and took the opportunity to walk the dogs nearby. Used to freedom, Teacher Duong was always overly excited during outings. The frigid temperatures of the Northeast didn't dampen its enthusiasm. It worked like a diligent ox, pulling me and Jojo far into the snowfields, occasionally leaping high and diving headfirst into the snow, joyfully burrowing and exhaling warm breath, its whiskers icing over. We must have walked about 2 kilometers, and Momo was still reluctant to leave. When the siblings called to say they were on their way back, I had no choice but to forcibly pull Momo to turn around. Momo wasn't having as much fun as expected, showing its stubborn streak when I tried pulling it along. Its legs seemed rooted to the ground, immovable. I couldn't help but laugh in frustration. "Hey donkey, how about we head back first, and after I'm done shopping, we can continue playing?" "Okay." The stubborn donkey paid no heed. A car approached from a distance and sped past us without slowing down. However, the passenger side window rolled down, and a woman stuck her head out, chuckling as she shouted to me, "Hey girl, are you struggling there?" Imagining how Momo and I must have looked to her, I chuckled too and decided not to bother negotiating with Momo. Instead, I simply picked it up, locked it in my arms, and headed back. Jojo walked beside me, looking up. I petted its head and asked, "What's up? Does Jojo want a hug too?" I wasn't sure if Jojo understood, but it enthusiastically tucked its ears back, transforming into a seal-like figure, wiggling its rear end in response before standing on its hind legs and placing its front paws on my arm. "Ouch, ouch, you're so heavy." I almost stumbled. Jojo was startled too and sheepishly stuck out its tongue, but it stubbornly clung to my arm, reaching for Momo. Confused, I held onto the strap of Momo's down jacket and offered it to Jojo, asking, "Do you want to help me carry Momo?" Jojo gave me an appreciative look, happily grabbed Momo's strap, and walked ahead of me with its chest puffed out. Realizing I hadn't moved, it looked back, signaling me to follow. I jogged to catch up with Jojo, walking side by side, looking down at its proud expression and Momo resignedly hanging from its mouth. I found the scene amusing. As we rounded a big curve and arrived at a spot overlooking the parking area, I noticed a motorcycle unusually close behind our SUV. Jojo sensed something was off too and put Momo down, alertly watching in that direction, ignoring Jojo's reaction. I tied them to a stone stump far from the road and went alone to investigate, keeping my distance. I found a good angle and began recording with my phone, zooming in to see a tall, thin young man crouched by the passenger side of my car, fiddling with the lock, unaware of my presence. With no obstacles blocking the view at this intersection, I couldn't see a third person. It seemed like a spontaneous, solo act. The road wasn't very busy, but it wasn't deserted either. It surprised me that someone would choose such a place for theft, given the conditions. Instead of smashing a window for a quick escape, he was painstakingly picking the lock. I suspected his target might not be the items inside but the car itself. Wanting to avoid a direct confrontation, I quietly backed away, stopped recording, and dialed the police. Just as the call connected, I saw the man open the passenger door with a snap. Coincidentally, as he was about to climb in, he spotted me in the rearview mirror. The man calmly exited my car, pocketed his hands, and walked towards me composedly. He was likely more than just a habitual thief, so I turned and ran, debating whether to seek help from a passing vehicle that might appear at any moment or to confront him directly. In the first few days when the apocalypse began in my previous life, Survival meant fighting enemies and zombies. The Lincoln family, mother and son, were no match. To protect them and myself, I've killed many people, including some strong and robust young men. When it comes to proficiency in killing, I'm certainly no less than the lanky figure I was facing. However, while I don't fear killing, particularly in self-defense, I dread the prospect of spending days in a cell awaiting an uncertain fate. After a brief internal conflict, I decided to run. As I quickly described the situation to the dispatcher, I pulled out pepper spray and a stun gun from my coat pocket. I could hear the sounds of the man chasing me through the snow. He was tall and more agile in the snowy conditions, which inevitably closed the gap between us. Suddenly, a series of fierce and powerful barks erupted, soon joined by the high-pitched yapping of smaller dogs. I glanced back to see the lanky man startled by the sudden barking. But he quickly located the source and realized the dogs were restrained. He seemed to think that if he could subdue me before I could unleash the dogs, they wouldn't pose a threat, so he quickened his pace. I instinctively knew I would be caught before reaching a sharp bend up ahead. Jojo and Momo were nearby, barking desperately, pulling at their leashes, trying to break free. I couldn't run any longer, timing my move. I spun around and sprayed the pepper spray directly into his eyes before he could react. He screamed, a long, agonizing sound, and stumbled but quickly regained his footing, tears and snot streaming down his face, angrily swinging a fruit knife at me. Before he could strike, I had already moved behind him. Just as I prepared to hit him with the stun gun on his neck artery, a massive shadow leaped with the force of a landslide, stepping on the man's shoulders and slamming him heavily onto the ground, splashing me with snow. The unexpected blow made the man drop his knife, and he reflexively turned over to protect his face with his arms, while Jojo pinned him down, violently shaking its head, fiercely tearing at his clothes, the sounds of fabric tearing, his muffled screams in the snow, Momo's continuous anxious barking, and Jojo's terrifying growls mixed into a harrowing symphony. I faintly heard the sound of police sirens in the distance. The lanky man was motionless. I needed to calm Jojo down so the officers wouldn't mistake it for a vicious dog and shoot it. I quickly collected the drop knife into my backpack and approached Jojo from the front. Seeing me, Jojo regained its composure, stopped tearing at the man, and stood on his back, pressing his head into the snow, growling menacingly at the criminal. I pulled the man's face out of the snow by his hair. He was still breathing, likely passed out from shock and lack of oxygen. His thick winter clothes had absorbed most of Jojo's attacks. His layers were shredded, with cotton scattered around and bite marks on his back. But they weren't severe. I took what was left of Jojo's leash and tied the lanky man up tightly like bundling a pig. Then, I crouched down, holding back tears, and soothingly stroked Jojo's tense back, whispering, "It's okay, sweetie. Come here. Let me hold you." Jojo obediently climbed off the man, instantly shedding its formidable demeanor for a frightened one, tail between its legs and back slightly arched, quickly burying itself in my embrace. Sitting on the ground, I held Jojo tightly as it trembled, listening to its whimpers of fear and distress. It was the first time I had ever heard it make a sound since I adopted it. The sound of police sirens grew louder. I looked in their direction and saw siblings pedaling a bicycle as fast as they could toward us. Soon, both groups arrived almost simultaneously. The scene before them, especially the pitiful state of the skinny man, left them shocked. Two male officers were busy untying and checking the skinny man's injuries, while a young female officer hesitated to approach the large dog in my arms, trying to help me get up. I could feel Jojo still trembling and waved her off, signaling that it wasn't necessary. She probably thought I was terrified by the life-threatening events that had just occurred minutes ago. She didn't insist and squatted a step away from us, speaking in a gentle tone to understand the situation. During the conversation, the siblings went to bring back Momo, and now I had two trembling dogs in my arms. The officers handcuffed the conscious skinny man and placed him in the police car, completed gathering evidence in the snow, and then took us back to the station. I submitted a video I had recorded earlier as evidence. When I finished giving my statement, the siblings were wiping the snow off Jojo and Momo with paper towels. The female officer who had responded to the call came in from the main door holding two large duck legs, asking me, "Can I give these to them? They're boiled in plain water." Momo, smelling the meat, stood up eagerly and stared drooling at the food in the officer's hand. She motioned for me to sit down and replied, "Of course, thank you." The officer, smiling, divided the duck legs between the two dogs, watching them tilt their heads and gnaw at the meat, and said to me, "You're welcome. These dogs aren't guard dogs, are they?" "No, they are companion breeds. I adopted them not long ago." The officer thought Jojo was gentle and reached out to pet his big head. Jojo paused his eating and gently nuzzled her palm with his nose. The officer's eyes brightened, and she continuously praised Jojo. "Good dog, what a brave boy." Then she told me, "The man you subdued is a wanted fugitive who committed murder. After a brief dispute with a convenience store owner, he broke into the owner's home at night and killed the family of 4. The motorcycle he was driving was stolen from a nearby village. Riding a motorcycle in this weather is unbearable, and seeing your car parked there, he had ill intentions. If the car had been empty, He planned to steal it to continue his escape. If someone was inside, he planned to eliminate them to avoid revealing his tracks. We were really frightened when we learned his identity, and grateful you were unharmed. Otherwise, your dogs are well raised. They really protect their owner. Having eaten the delicious food, the two little dogs had already forgotten their previous fear and anxiety. Dozing off carefree in the unfamiliar environment, honestly, I adopted Jojo out of compassion. Knowing that the end was near, if I still insisted on finding him a new owner, it would be no different than sending him to his death. I never expected that one day, in the face of danger, this gentle and friendly Bernese mountain dog, who had silently endured human mistreatment and knew the danger of knives from past wounds, would overcome his instincts to protect me fiercely. After settling the account for the mountain goods with the siblings and learning they still had several £100 of goods at home, I suggested, if you're not in urgent need of money, don't sell the rest yet, keep it for me, and I'll give you a 2,000 yuan deposit to come back and pick it up before the new year. The siblings agreed without hesitation to keep the goods for me, but insisted on not taking my deposit, perhaps feeling guilty because they thought my encounter was somehow connected to taking care of their business. I could only smile and persuade them. Take it, it's almost New Year, keep some goods at home. If you really feel uneasy, just give me a discount next time I come. The siblings exchanged a glance and reached an agreement. Sheepishly, the brother accepted the money from my hand. I dropped them off at the same crossroad where we met and repeatedly urged them not to go out on the 28th day of the lunar year, but to stay home and wait for me to come and pick up the goods, as long as they heed my advice. They should be able to sustain themselves for quite some time after the apocalypse with the New Year goods and mountain products they have at home. Chapter 8, Final Preparations. Countdown to the Apocalypse. 9 days. Due to unexpected delays on the road, the moving company's truck arrived at the neighborhood entrance an hour earlier than I did. During my last inspection of the apartment, I had already marked all the storage shelves in Unit B with numbers. So now the workers only needed to match the boxes to the corresponding shelf numbers. Throughout the unloading and moving process, there was no sign of the property management staff or any homeowners. The whole complex felt as empty as a ghost town. 6 middle-aged men worked tirelessly for nearly 3 hours without a break for lunch, quickly and accurately organizing all the supplies. By 2 p.m., the men were eager to leave. Since there were no food delivery services covering this new neighborhood and I didn't want to reveal that I was living alone in unit next door, I rummaged through my SUV and put together a bag of biscuits, red dates, walnuts, and 6 bottles of milk for them to snack on during their journey. I also handed each of them a red envelope as compensation for their lost work time. This money was probably an unexpected bonus for them, 6 men over 50, with graying hair, still exhausting themselves physically to make a living, and they each bowed deeply to express their gratitude. I felt a deep unease in my heart, living this life again. In order to protect myself, I dare not spread the news of the impending apocalypse publicly. People like them, who struggle to make a living, how likely are they to survive the early chaos of the apocalypse? And what about the families who lose their main provider? Could they quickly collapse? It's likely they will just repeat the fate of the previous generation. For the first time since my rebirth, I felt truly powerless. Countdown to the apocalypse, 8 days. Taking advantage of the good weather today, I cleaned up the balcony of Unit A. Old Mr. Isaac had a keen aesthetic sense. Instead of growing vegetables, he planted a variety of ornamental plants and common medicinal herbs, which I decided to keep. As for the ornamental plants, they were just a waste of planting space. I removed most of the inedible ones, leaving only those with edible value like roses, wisteria, jasmine, sunflowers, mint, basil, and bamboo, while others might build swimming pools on their balconies. Mr. Isaac ingeniously built a 10-square-meter fish pond, which currently housed lotus, koi, and guppy fish. I plan to add carp, crucian carp, snails, and crayfish to increase our sources of meat. After lunch, I went to Unit B, which was used as a warehouse, and picked out several large boxes that I had marked especially, loading them into my SUV. These boxes, which I planned to send to friends and relatives across the country under the guise of border travel souvenirs, included vacuum-sealed supplies like low-moisture nuts, large rye bread, extremely sweet Russian candies, various canned fruits, wild honey, cured meats, and sausages. I drove to rent a small warehouse on the outskirts of the city, then went to the largest agricultural market in Ichuan to buy some local seafood, northeast rice, and soybeans. Back in the car, I repackaged these items along with the mountain goods I had bought the day before, keeping half for myself and packing the rest into several boxes. I randomly chose a SF Express Logistics Center in the city and sent the boxes to Professor Harrison in C Province, MS, Lynn, and Aunt Nora in the capital of S Province. Once home, I started making calls to everyone. Uncle Gavin and Aunt Abigail were not aware that I had sold the house in C Province to the Gabriel's family. I invited them and their daughter to visit my home. I made various excuses to others, telling Professor Harrison that Aunt Nora had entrusted me with something for him and his wife, telling Ms. Lynn that I wanted to bring the recovered Jojo to her house to play, and telling Aunt Nora that I planned to visit her home on my way back from vacation, in any case. They all agreed to make time on the afternoon of the 28th day of the lunar year to have dinner with me and their families. I sincerely hoped they wouldn't cancel because that day, not just an ordinary Saturday, was also the day the apocalypse would arrive. Countdown to the apocalypse, 7 days. As the apocalypse approached just before the spring festival, everyone was busy preparing for the new year. And the supermarkets were naturally bustling. In a previous life, Gabriel's wife and children had been helping out at the supermarket during that time. Realizing something was amiss, they didn't attempt to maintain order but instead hid in Gabriel's office immediately. They only emerged after the supermarket was cleared by survivors, having escaped unscathed. Later, George mentioned proudly that it was fortunate he hadn't insisted on going to watch a soccer game that afternoon, but had obediently stayed to work at the supermarket. Indeed, a dutiful child is often lucky. As his elder sister, I had never given George a decent gift. In this life, I managed to fulfill his long-held wish to watch a basketball game before he died. Gabriel's birthday was on the 2nd day of the Lunar New Year. I made a special call to reminisce with Gabriel, reminding him of how his first child had once gone to great lengths to celebrate his birthday for him. Moved, I said, "Dad, I know you have to celebrate with Aunt Hannah and others on the 2nd day, but I don't want to join them. I want to give you a unique birthday celebration, just the two of us. Can you spare some time on the afternoon of the 28th to meet me in the office? We can celebrate in advance, just the two of us." Gabriel, who always sought to feel important and never thought he was wrong, was very receptive to this approach that played into his need for attention and affection. He was overjoyed and responded enthusiastically, "I'll make time. It's been many years since Ava helped me blow out birthday candles. I always feel something's missing every birthday. This year, it will be just the two of us, no one else." Seeing his agreement, I took the opportunity to suggest Arya and George finally have a winter break and have voluntarily helped out at the supermarket. They must be tired. Since George is a fan of our province's basketball team, why not encourage them to relax and watch a game? Gabriel, who was worried about how to politely distance himself from Hannah and her son, was decisive when he heard my suggestion. He slapped the table and declared that he would send the three of them to the game and immediately buy the tickets. I had already purchased tickets for the game George wanted to see well in advance. The first row in the middle section farthest from the exit, 3 tickets, 1 for each person except Gabriel. Gabriel was now placing an order but wouldn't be able to choose such good seats. I quickly took over the task of buying tickets, a move that Gabriel repeatedly praised for being perceptive and considerate. Not long after arranging the plans for the Gabriel's families for members on the 28th, a senior agricultural broker personally delivered the supplies I had asked him to collect to Ichuan. I first inspected the supplies in the warehouse I had rented the day before. After sending the broker off, I immediately removed the seats from the back of my SUV and made several trips to bring all the supplies home. The winter temperature in Ichuan was already relatively high, regularly above 0 degrees Celsius, possibly a precursor to the apocalyptic high temperatures. In recent days, the temperature had been slowly climbing, and it was now 8 degrees Celsius outside. This was advantageous for me. I could confidently place these delicate crops and livestock temporarily in the 2 attics without worrying about them freezing to death. After a busy day, I went to the terrace to repair the clay stove I had built the day before. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, I looked through the open door of the attic and saw Jojo and Momo observing the new residents of our home. Jojo sat solemnly studying a litter of rabbit kits in front of him, while Momo, as if on a stimulant, darted around the rows of livestock with its tongue out, making my head spin. The clay stove was a success. If one day I ran out of solid alcohol, charcoal, or coal briquettes, and the power system failed, I could still rely on burning wood for cooking. I started a pot on the freshly made clay stove and used it to prepare a steaming pot of seafood and cabbage stew. The scent of herbs on the terrace blended with the aroma of the food. Using the light from the attic and the scattered starlight, I sat by the still warm stove, contentedly enjoying this belated dinner. Since there was plenty of fertilizer, I didn't need to resort to using the dog's waste. Since moving to Ichuan, I had planned to train the 2 brothers to use the guest room's automatic flush toilet. After installing a custom toilet ring designed for dogs to squat on and placing a ramp next to the toilet for the mop to use, the challenging teaching work began. Jojo learned quickly, but the problem was with Momo. No matter how many times I placed him on the toilet, or how many times Jojo demonstrated, the stubborn donkey could not grasp the logic behind our actions. It was firmly convinced that it should do its business in the bushes, and the moment I wasn't watching, it would dash up to the attic and wreak havoc on my plants. Just when I was about to give up on intensive training and let nature take its course, they surprised me. At that time, I was lying on a lounge chair watching a trending live broadcast of Emma's wedding. I remember clearly, in the past life, she only announced the news 3 days later, but in this life, not only was the date moved up, the engagement turned into a wedding. I wondered how Lincoln, with his worse-off circumstances in this life compared to the last, would react to this news. While I was watching the live broadcast, I noticed Jojo, in a frenzy, carrying Momo down from the attic, too busy to even bother with me, and dashed towards the guest room, lazily following them with my phone in hand. I saw Jojo trying to rush Momo to the toilet, Momo, being carried by the neck, dangled unsteadily, facing a pressing need. It couldn't hold back and had already dropped a mess on the floor. I couldn't help but shout in frustration, "No, no, no, stop Jojo, stop." Confused, Jojo stopped and turned to look at me. As it turned, another mess squeezed out and, following Jojo's movement, flew towards me in a parabola. I froze completely as Jojo, seeing my lack of reaction, happily placed Momo on the toilet. Thud, thud, thud. It was Momo's first successful attempt at using the toilet. After this incident, Momo finally got the hang of it. The ramps that had been specially prepared for it at home were now idle, as it was all up to its brother Jojo to laboriously carry it to and from the bed and toilet using his mouth. End of the world countdown, 5 days. I was busy driving around Ichuan City, hopping from one gas station to another, refueling and using the siphon principle to pump diesel out when I unexpectedly received an Instagram message from Aunt Abigail. Although I told Aunt Abigail that I didn't know Lincoln and his mother, she was clearly still concerned about their whereabouts. She sent me a message to inform me that Lincoln had left his mother alone and checked himself out of the hospital last night. Lincoln's mother was frantically searching for her son. I was a bit surprised. Lincoln's hand was still as limp as a boneless chicken claw. What was he up to? But, since it didn't affect me, I decided to let it be, so I replied to Aunt Abigail's message and then put the matter out of my mind. However, after finishing my tasks for the day and comfortably watching TV with 2 puppies in my arms, I saw Emma in the news again. This time it was not good news. Emma and a mysterious man both fell into the river and disappeared. The rescue team was currently searching and trying to recover them. As the host narrated, the television screen repeatedly showed a slow-motion surveillance clip where Emma, pushed by a man in black who was covered from head to toe with only his eyes visible, plunged into the turbulent river waters. The man also fell into the river due to inertia. The moment I saw the so-called mysterious man, I recognized him as Lincoln. In his previous life, Lincoln was shocked and in disbelief when he learned of Emma's engagement. This time around, his circumstances were much worse. His hands and face were ruined. He couldn't wait for the 500,000 needed to save his life, couldn't get in touch with me, and, at his wit's end, he finally realized that he had been a pawn in someone else's game and decided to confront the instigator. According to the timestamp on the surveillance footage, they fell into the river around 10 a.m. It was now past 9 p.m. and they had not been rescued. Considering the height of the fall, the speed, and the temperature of the river water in winter, their chances of survival were slim. I couldn't help but clap in admiration. Lincoln, in his quest for revenge, recklessly abandoned his mother, who couldn't move from her hospital bed, and sacrificed his own life. It was even more tragic than the ending I had specifically designed for him and his mother. Such filial piety, truly, countdown to doomsday, 2 days. From my experience in a previous life, after mutating, the main source of nutrition for the pothose was no longer soil but flesh. It began to hunt actively like a Venus flytrap, attracting insects and small reptiles with a special scent it secreted, and feeding by embedding its roots into the prey. Because of this habit, pothose strongly repelled pyrethrum. Wherever pyrethrum grew, pothose stayed clear. Thus, to prevent an uncontrollable overgrowth of mutated pothose that could overly encase the building and affect basic functions like solar power generation and emergency escape, I painstakingly planted pyrethrum in the reinforced walls of the balcony, attic, and rooftop. As the rising temperatures reminded me, I also applied heat-insulating film to all the windows of the 2 houses, installed blackout curtains, and enclosed a large area on the balcony with a black and white film to create a semi-enclosed heat-insulating greenhouse. Because in my last life, after the apocalypse, I drank rainwater that had settled and been exposed to the sun for a long time without any issues, I almost forgot to stock up on water after setting up a rainwater treatment system. I hurriedly ordered a batch of pure water filters and activated carbon filter pads from local merchants. I also purchased a large quantity of containers of different sizes and materials, biodegradable disposable eco-friendly meal boxes, and 2 second-hand bicycles. I converted most of my remaining money into charcoal, honeycomb coal, solid alcohol, various instant food packs, compressed biscuits, and restocked on medicines, after finding time to dismantle all the speakers from the appliances at home. Except for the entertainment devices, the preparations for doomsday were nearly complete. Countdown to doomsday. One day, I went to the morning market and bought a bunch of fresh vegetables and fruits to bring home, planning to process and store them in the fridge according to online tutorials, hoping they would last until my vegetable garden started producing. While I was busy with the vegetables, Uncle Gavin called to inform me that he had taken care of everything. I thanked him profusely and reminded him not to forget his visit to my place the next afternoon. After storing the vegetables and fruits, I climbed up to the balcony and moved the shade-loving and heat-sensitive plants into the greenhouse I had set up a few days earlier. With all the chores at home wrapped up, I utilized the skills I had honed at a vocational technical college to install surveillance cameras around the balcony, attic, and emergency exits. I sealed off the elevator hall door before nightfall and created a small door at the top of the security gate that allowed only one person to pass through. I then reinforced and securely locked and welded the door shut. After a final check, I made sure that everything was in order. I was ready, and the big show at the Gabriel's family was about to begin. Chapter 9: The Resurgence of the Apocalypse. The day the apocalypse descended, having done everything within my power, I let go of my burdens and slept soundly. Sometime during the night, I faintly noticed dawn breaking. Jojo and Momo got out of bed and left the room, but I was too exhausted to move, so I let myself continue sleeping. As noon passed, the temperature climbed higher, my mouth was dry, and in my dream, I was frantically searching for water to drink. I could faintly hear strange noises buzzing in my ear. When I opened my eyes, I saw Momo perched on the edge of my bed. Noticing that I was awake, Momo wagged its tail vigorously and stretched its mouth towards me, as if showing off. I then realized that the strange noise I heard in my dream was coming from its slightly open mouth. I turned over and propped myself up on the bed, pinching its mouth to look inside. The source of the noise turned out to be a cicada that had come from who knows where. No wonder Momo was excited today but hadn't greeted me with its usual soft woofs. It was as if it had a cicada in its mouth. I traded a beef rib bone for the noisy prey in Momo's mouth. I threw the struggling insect into the toilet, watching it swirl around before disappearing into the water in an instant. The thermometer in the living room showed that the current temperature in Ichiwan was already a high 25 degrees Celsius. It would be even hotter in Province. Fortunately, the unusually high temperatures didn't affect the mood of Hannah and her son. At 2 in the afternoon, Gabriel informed me that Hannah and her son had already set off for the stadium. I sat on the sofa, monitoring the overall surveillance of Gabriel's office in Georgia. Gabriel's office originally had no surveillance, but Uncle Gavin had installed a pinhole camera for me that could capture his desk and the entrance. Of course, Uncle Gavin also secured the surveillance access for Georgia. I wasn't sure what mechanism turned people into zombies. I could only rely on my past life experience to know that at about 3:48 p.m. today, approximately a quarter of the population would transform into flesh-eating monsters without any warning. Those who reacted a bit slower would often be killed by their former companions within minutes of the outbreak. If they died with their brains intact, they would not rest in peace after death, as they would become a new wave of even more decrepit zombies. At 3 p.m., an hour had passed since the meeting time I had arranged with friends and relatives. During this time, they sent me messages on Instagram asking about the situation, but I didn't respond. At 3:20 p.m., calls started popping up on my phone screen, which I ignored. At 3:28 p.m., I locked Jojo and Momo in the attic upstairs and muted several devices in the living room that were displaying supermarket surveillance and live broadcast of the game. At 3:30 p.m., I called Uncle Gavin, who had been waiting at my doorstep for an hour. Uncle Gavin, don't ask questions, just listen. Something's happening outside, right now. Bring Aunt Abigail and your daughter into my house for refuge. The door code is 314796. Repeat, 314796. All right, now lock all the doors and windows, and no matter what noises you hear, do not go out to check. Do not open the door for anyone. Also, the front door key is in the shoe cabinet. You can use anything you need in my house. Do you understand? No? Absolutely do not come out looking for me. I'm safe at a friend's house. Take care of yourselves. At 3:33 p.m., I ended the call with Uncle Gavin and then called Gabriel. Hello, Dad. Are you waiting in the office for me? Gabriel responded cheerfully. Dad keeps his promises. I've cleared my afternoon schedule just for you. Gabriel wasn't lying. I could see everything clearly on the surveillance. He spent the afternoon idly playing Spider Solitaire at his desk. Thank you for being so kind to me. Did you receive the gift I sent to the supermarket through the errand boy at noon? Yes. Dad was planning to wait for you to come before opening it. Why don't you go ahead and open it now? I watched as Gabriel picked up a cardboard box from under his desk, obediently opened it, and then asked, "Is this a speaker?" "Yes, I remember you love listening to symphonies, so I specifically picked up the best-equipped professional speaker for you. Try it out and see if it's as miraculous as advertised." At these words, Gabriel's face broke into an uncontrollable smile. Without any suspicion, he immediately connected it to Bluetooth and began playing symphonic music. "Dad, turn it up, I want to listen too," I added. As the music volume increased over the phone, I pretended to be absorbed in the music and remained silent. It was now 3:44 p.m. I sent voice invitations to other relatives and friends, quickly hanging up after they answered. Then Nas sent a pre-edited message advising them to lock their doors and windows for refuge, ignoring their follow-up questions. At 3:47 p.m., my heart began to beat uncontrollably fast. I watched Gabriel tapping his foot and lightly swinging his arms to the beat of the music. I caught a glimpse of Hannah and her two children flashing by in a live broadcast of the sports event. The countdown hit 0. Suddenly, chaos erupted both at the supermarket and the sports venue. There was no space to hide or escape in the basketball arena. The tall, athletic zombies disregarded obstacles like sponsor signs and spectator seats. Running as if the place was deserted, I saw Hannah and her children in the front row unable to get up and escape before being pounced on by a zombie that burst from the court into the stands. Hannah tried to protect her children underneath her, but she was no match for the brute strength of the zombie, who, wearing jersey number 4, pinned her down by sheer weight. Desperately, Hannah used her shoulder bag to fend off the increasingly close head of the zombie. George and Hannah, both larger than Hannah, could only cower helplessly behind their mother, screaming in terror. The sharp screams of Hannah attracted other zombies, who abandoned their immediate prey and moved toward them. A blood-covered zombie approached from the side without effort, bent down, and tore a large chunk of flesh from the unresisting Hannah's neck. Hannah finally closed her noisy mouth, incredulously covering her wound with her hand, but it was in vain as blood spurted from her carotid artery, attracting other zombies that swarmed over and feasted on the 3 doomed victims. The live broadcast abruptly cut off. In the supermarket, cries erupted everywhere, with staff and customers frantically running. I saw 3 zombies chasing a woman in a staff uniform towards the office area. Interrupting Gabriel, who was immersed in his music, I said, "Dad, I'm about to reach your office door. Close your eyes and open the door. And after I count down from 321, you can open them. I've prepared a surprise for you." Gabriel, grumbling about how his child was too old for such games, yet honestly complied. The moment he opened the door, the zombies chasing the woman swiftly rounded the last corner. The woman, seeing Gabriel's office door open, scrambled towards him. Hearing the commotion, Gabriel abruptly opened his eyes, but it took a moment too long to realize what the situation in front of him meant as he stood frozen, phone in hand. The grandiose strings played what seemed like a requiem for him as I said with a smile, "Dad, happy anniversary of your future passing, next year." As the words fell, the disheveled, tear-streaked woman sidestepped into the office door and pushed Gabriel hard from behind, slamming the door shut. Despite his struggles and screams, the 3 zombies circled and obscured Gabriel's fallen body, but his phone, still transmitting, clearly captured the sound of the excited zombies feasting. I quietly watched the surveillance footage until, after about 10 minutes, the 3 blood-covered zombies rose and aimlessly began searching for their next target, until Gabriel suddenly stood up in a bizarre posture, dragging his mangled body to join the hunt for food. In my previous life, the biological father who pushed me to face death has become someone else's human shield in this life. It seems that karma truly does come full circle. Over the past month, I have been masquerading as a fawning daughter of a wealthy father's ex-wife in front of the Gabriel's family, displaying weakness only to make them overconfident and lower their guard. Now, I have received the retribution I deserved. Hannah and her son died far away, while Gabriel met his end in a supermarket, his blood serving as an apology to my mother and me. The 4 main conspirators who sent me into a horde of zombies in my last life have finally met their clean end. My phone keeps ringing with incoming calls, but I don't plan to respond anymore. Uncle Gavin and others are at my place. Since I have always lived alone, I had the doors and windows of that apartment reinforced earlier this year, making it much safer than the old, decrepit place they were renting. I've also left various supplies for them at home, from food to water purification tablets, from a medical kit to planting soil. Anything that wouldn't seem out of place in an ordinary household. I've prepared for them. I managed to keep other people at home, as long as none of their family members have mutated. With the box of specialties I sent them, they won't have to venture out to compete for resources without understanding the zombies' lethal weaknesses and transmission mechanisms. After all, I don't owe anyone a life-saving debt, and I am not obligated to ensure anyone else's safety in their later years. In this cruel post-apocalyptic world, ultimately, They can only rely on themselves. The grievances of 2 lifetimes are now settled, and from now on, I embark on my new life. The second day after the apocalypse, the outdoor temperature in Ichiwan should stabilize around 43 degrees Celsius, just slightly hotter than the summer days in the hottest cities before the apocalypse. Most of the plants on the terrace should be able to grow normally after adapting to the climate. I'm sitting cross-legged on the sofa, studying a gardening manual with 2 ice-packed air coolers blowing vigorously at me. The indoor temperature is maintained between 29 and 31 degrees Celsius, but I'm still feeling extremely hot as the 2 little dogs lie next to me, resting their heads on my legs as if they were before the temperature rise. It's like having a constant temperature hot water bag on each side of my thighs. I can't help but use the book in my hands to fan myself. Momo and Jojo are also feeling the heat, occasionally sticking out their tongues and panting rapidly in their sleep, but whenever I try to move their heads or even change my position, the 2 dogs persistently snuggle back up to me. I glance at the wall clock. It's 5 p.m. To avoid detection, I can't turn on the lights on the terrace in the evening. These days, I've been tending to the crops on the rooftop as the sun sets. I wake up the slumbering Momo and Jojo, and the 2 dogs look at me somewhat groggily. Time to get up. I gently pull at their furry ears and ask, "Big sister is going upstairs. Do you want to come and play?" Upon hearing this, Jojo immediately jumps down from the sofa silently. As soon as Momo hears the word play, his eyes, which were still sleepy a moment ago, instantly light up. He sits at the edge of the sofa, wagging his tail eagerly and making a soft humming noise. Once I lift the impatient Momo down from the sofa, Jojo is already sitting by, waiting to set off. At that time, the sun has not yet set, and the ground scorched by the sunlight is still very hot. I leave Momo and Jojo in the attic to entertain themselves and go to work on the terrace fully equipped. The pyrethrum plants are thriving well, and the successfully mutated potholes have already covered the exterior walls of the building from the rooftop to the 12th floor. A breeze causes the lush leaves to rustle softly. However, other plants are not so fortunate. The sudden rise in temperature has drained some fruit trees of their vitality, causing their remaining branches to dehydrate and break easily at a touch. These fruit trees are not very tall, and without using carpentry tools, I sit on a small stool and easily break them into arm-length pieces of firewood, piling them beside the greenhouse. In the past few days, some poultry and livestock have succumbed to the high temperatures and died, which I promptly processed and froze in the fridge. These fruit woods can be used as fuel for smoking meat. After I finish cleaning up the scattered branches and leaves, the sky has turned completely dark. I let Jojo and Momo out from the attic. The ground still retains the warmth of the sun. Momo doesn't seem to mind and scurries to the fish pond to sniff around, but Jojo's feet are more delicate, and he seems to feel the heat of the surface. Their hooves were scalded, unsure of where to place them, so they dejectedly retreated back to the attic, with chrysanthemums and pothose plants around. The top floor was almost free from various annoying flying insects. I opened the doors of the 2 attics to air them out and sat by the door in a chair, browsing the latest information online, accompanied by the breeze and the sound of Momo scurrying around. Finally, after several cautious attempts, Jojo too ran out to frolic. Suddenly, I caught a whiff of a strong, refreshing fragrance mixed in the evening breeze. Curious about the source of the aroma, I then heard a low whimper from Jojo and hurriedly grabbed a flashlight to check on him. To my surprise, the rose bushes left by Grandpa Isaac were blooming out of season, and the fragrance I had smelled came from these flowers. Jojo was standing beside them, his tail hanging low and swaying slightly, his head turned away, not daring to look at me, with a rose stem in his mouth. Seeing him like this, I immediately understood. The earlier scream must have been caused by the thorns of the roses. I crouched down, grabbed the stem where there were no thorns, and Jojo obediently let me pull the stem out of his mouth. The thorns on the stem were unusually hard and glinted coldly. I tapped them with my fingernail and found they were much harder than normal rose thorns. I carefully examined Jojo's mouth and found bleeding points on his gums and palate. Holding Jojo's cheeks solemnly, I stared at him and said, "You can't chew on flowers anymore. Do you understand? You kept holding it in your mouth even though you were bleeding from the thorns. Are you a big fool?" Jojo smacked his lips and slightly turned his head, refusing to meet my gaze. I pinched Jojo's whisker pads, but he looked everywhere but at me. I forcibly turned his head to give him a stern lecture, but unexpectedly, he stepped forward and pleasingly licked my face. I couldn't help but laugh and stopped him from continuing his flattering behavior. When it was time to take the brothers home to sleep, Jojo kept looking back reluctantly at the rose bushes. If I'm not mistaken, those roses must have mutated too, and Jojo really liked their fragrance. I plan to try grafting them onto wild roses in the next few days. If successful, there might be some unexpected results. It's the third day after the apocalypse, and it's New Year's Eve. I've been busy preparing the New Year's Eve dinner since I got up. In previous years, I always spent these festive, family reuniting holidays like Mid-Autumn and Spring Festival alone, deliberately avoiding them. But this year, at the start of humanity's great calamity, I've oddly found peace, my resentment has dissipated, and I'm no longer alone. It's time to comfort the departed and live well. When my mother was alive, she used to pound glutinous rice at home every New Year to make rice cakes and New Year cakes. The pestle forcefully hitting the steaming glutinous rice filled the air with a rich, mellow aroma of rice. Salivating beside her, I waited as she plucked a small piece from the freshly steamed batch of rice dumplings, sprinkled it with sugar-mixed soybean flour, and amusingly stuffed it into my eagerly waiting mouth. That bite was simple, solid, yet blissful, a cherished memory from the past. A flavor I've missed for years. Using purified water, I steamed a large pot of glutinous rice and, mimicking my mother's actions, energetically swung a wooden pestle, sweating slightly from the effort. The two puppies were initially lying by my feet, keeping me company as I worked. Suddenly, Momo, with its butt in the air, lay in front of Jojo, inviting him to play. Thus, the two dogs began excitedly frolicking around. Jojo's black fur flew into the air, into my nostrils, and onto the pristine white glutinous rice in my mortar. Unable to bear it any longer, I chased the two troublemakers out of the kitchen and closed the door. After frying and cooking in the kitchen, when I came out to serve the food, I found that Momo and Jojo were not waiting at the door as expected. With all dishes on the table, I searched around suited but still couldn't find any trace of the dogs. Just as I was about to head up to the attic, Momo came tumbling down the stairs at breakneck speed, his ears flipping out to reveal pink inner ears just like a rabbit's. He ran up to me, screeched to a halt, and began happily circling me, wagging his tail and shaking his head as if presenting a treasure. It was unusual for Jojo not to show up, climbing the stairs with Momo in tow. I was speechless as soon as we entered the attic. The floor was strewn with tufts of black dog hair, gray feathers floated gently in the air, and white bird droppings dotted the area. Two pigeons perched on the top of the entry door dove down at us, flapping their wings angrily and tugging at Momo's fur. Momo, who in a past life could catch snakes with his bare mouth, just clenched his eyes shut and buried his face in my chest, silently enduring the pigeon slaps and sharp beaks, while I waved my arms to drive the pigeons away. I kept calling out for Jojo. After shouting 4 or 5 times, Jojo finally emerged, tail between his legs, from underneath a rabbit hutch. I locked both him and Momo outside the attic door, and it took a Herculean effort to capture the aggressive pigeons and put them back in their cage. The pigeon couple's nest was empty. No wonder they were chasing after the dog. After cleaning up the chaotic attic, I opened the door. Outside, Momo's eyes sparkled as he wagged his tail at me, while Jojo, with his furrowed brows, lay resignedly on his front paws. I pried open Momo's chubby cheeks and found 3 pigeon eggs in his mouth. Thinking I wanted the eggs, Momo willingly spat them into my palm. I stared silently at the intact but damp eggs, still warm from Momo's body heat. Originally, both the door to the attic and the pigeon cage were closed, but clearly, a giant who could open doors had infiltrated our home. Jojo handled the door opening and took the beatings, while Momo was in charge of stealing the loot and showing off. Clearly, the division of labor was well defined, and the brothers were in sync, which made me burst out laughing despite myself. It was getting dark, the blackout curtains were already drawn, ensuring not a sliver of light escaped from the room. The living room was brightly lit, and last year's Spring Festival gala played softly on the TV. I had prepared a lavish New Year's Eve dinner for the 2 dogs, who were eagerly devouring their meal. I raised my glass, clinking it against the wineglass across the table. Just as I was about to drink, suddenly, all light and noise vanished. I drew the curtains and, using a high-powered telescope mounted on a tripod, I surveyed the Ichen City district, which lay in eerie and utter darkness. On the 3rd day after the apocalypse began, Ichen lost power. The entire city was enveloped in endless night and despair. Chapter 10, Our 4 Seasons. The first spring of the apocalypse, before the end days, I had kept track of the residency status in our complex using various methods, based on the number of lit windows each night and the thickness of dust at each apartment's doorway. There were no more than 20 households residing in the complex at that time, including myself. Only 3 households were occupied in my building. On the day the apocalypse broke out, the complex remained peaceful for a long time, as if it was an untouched paradise from another world. That peace was shattered when a minibus parked erratically at the main gate of the complex, its body shaking violently. A security guard approached cautiously to check the situation, only to be instantly killed by several zombies that burst through the door. These zombies then entered the complex through the small door of the security room and roamed throughout. Over these 3 months, I occasionally used the telescope to observe the conditions of survivors within my line of sight, whether many people were out and hadn't returned on the day of the apocalypse, or they were home but didn't survive the initial days of the disaster outbreak. During this period, only my building and another across from me had residents collecting rainwater with pots and pans on the balconies and outside windows. One apartment housed a middle-aged couple who hadn't been seen since day 34 of the apocalypse, likely having silently perished due to lack of resources. In another apartment lived a woman around 50 years old who, she managed to survive this period, thanks largely to her balcony, which was filled with fruits and vegetables grown in nutrient pots and wooden crates before the apocalypse. This aunt lived in good health. Shortly after the couple died, I saw her deftly avoiding zombies. Nimbly climbing over the community wall with a snakeskin bag tied around her waist, and digging humus on the hill behind the community. On her way back, she strode along with 2 bags full of goods, with 3 dead squirrels tied to her waistband. The aunt's confidence quickly swelled. On her second outing, she even dared to lock the constantly open door of the security room while dodging zombies in a chase. From then on, whenever she went out hunting and gathering, she would also take the opportunity to smash the heads of 1 or 2 zombies she encountered. Up until half a month ago, she had completely cleared the community of these undead roamers. 10 days ago, she even boldly set out from the community gate on an empty tricycle, heading towards the residential houses around the community. However, less than 2 hours later, I saw her chased back by several emaciated zombies dressed like villagers. The tricycle was lost somewhere, and she returned in disarray, carrying a small bag of flour, swiftly climbing over the wall. This caused the zombies, unwilling to return empty-handed, to linger at the community entrance for several days. The aunt must have been shaken by the experience, as she hasn't left her apartment since then, focusing solely on tending to the crops on her balcony. Her recent harvest seems quite good. I saw her busy drying string beans and eggplants for several days, and her tomatoes are growing big and red, looking much better than the few plants on my terrace. But my crop yield isn't bad either. The presence of devil's ivy and pyrethrum has kept pests at bay without adversely affecting the bees that pollinate them. With ample water, nutrients, and light, and even pollination, there have been no major pest or disease outbreaks. My terrace has seen a bumper harvest lately. Various birds have been attracted by the fragrance of the ripening fruits and vegetables, trying to share some of the bounty. I had already bagged the precious fruits and installed bird nets around the more delicate plants, so these birds foraging doesn't cause unbearable loss. However, their frequent takeoffs and landings on my rooftop might attract the attention of other survivors. I've tried various methods to deter the birds, but none have been effective, which is quite frustrating. As the sun sets, Momo tirelessly circles the terrace chasing away birds. I picked a batch of ripe watermelons from the vine, carefully stacking them in a bamboo basket, with Jojo following, insistently pushing a large vine-woven fruit basket towards me. I picked the smallest melon from the top layer of the basket and stuffed it into his basket, shouldered the basket, patted his head, and pointed towards the attic door. Jojo immediately understood, carrying the basket with a light and proud step, leading me to the attic. As night approached, Jojo and I sat at the attic door with a fan, waiting for Momo to come home. Momo was squatting next to several chili plants, intently watching a bird that was brazenly pecking at a fig, glancing back quickly at my call and then focusing back on the bird. Momo, stop looking. It's too hot. Come home for some ice watermelon. Momo ignored me, showing a stubborn piggyback. I took Jojo home to drop off the melons, then went back up to the terrace, only to see Momo suddenly leap from hiding in the bushes, swiftly breaking the neck of a large bird and excitedly running towards us with it. Momo sat down, spat the dead bird in front of me, head held high, eyes squinting happily, tail sweeping the ground joyfully, clearly waiting for praise. I crouched down to look at the bird. It was a magpie, unusually large, bigger than the pigeons we raised. Fortunately, Momo's mouth was wide enough, otherwise, it might not have managed to hold it. Though not a hunting dog, Momo's ability to catch birds and snakes demonstrated impressive survival skills. I scooped it up and exaggeratedly praised. My goodness, Momo, you're amazing. Momo is so incredible that we don't even need to bother raising pigeons and quails, right? Jojo and I can just live off the mop boss. Lost in my constant praises, Momo became obsessed with catching birds for me, turning into a real bird chaser. The first summer of the apocalypse, Aunt went out to the sea and came back. Seeing the 2 baskets of seafood she brought back was tempting, but I was more concerned about the marine vibrio bacteria, with my fish pond full of more river delicacies than I could eat. Risking my life for a few bites of fresh seafood seemed unworthy. The heavy lotus pods in the pond swayed with the evening breeze, drool-worthy, wearing overalls and wading into the water. I couldn't resist peeling a lotus seed and popping it into my mouth. The core was fresh and tender, without any bitterness. The seeds were cool and sweet, quietly blossoming on my tongue with a fragrance more delicate and lingering than the lotus flower itself. Eating a few seemed to dissipate some of the summer heat. The discarded lotus seed husks on the water's surface attracted fish pecking at them, and black and red crayfish climbed up my rain pants, brandishing their claws proudly. I picked about a dozen lotus pods by the pond and cut a few lotus flowers and leaves, planning to take them home for a vase. The fish and shrimp in the pond were growing and reproducing wildly, giving me the pleasure of scooping fish effortlessly. Just dipping the net in the water would guarantee a catch. By the pond, one bucket held several fish, while another contained crayfish trying to escape by climbing over each other. I ordered Momo and Jojo to stay away to avoid being pinched by the crayfish. I went to the other end of the pond, bending down to feel for snails on the pond wall. Suddenly, I heard a splash. Looking up, Momo had knocked over the fish bucket and was about to bite into one of the fish, palm-sized and as thick as 2 fingers. Jojo sat obediently 3 meters away from the bucket, ears tucked, looking at me anxiously. I quickly threw the snails I was holding and called out, "Mama no." Momo ignored me. I had no choice but to climb out of the pond, bypassing rows of water spinach, and rushed over in my clumsy rain boots to stop it, but Momo had already started crunching down on the fish. After swallowing the first bite, it jerked its head up, dazed for a few seconds, then couldn't help retching twice, seemingly nauseated by the taste of the food just swallowed, yet it didn't walk away but hesitantly lowered its head. Thinking about taking another bite, seeing me approaching, it didn't run. Momo wasn't food aggressive, so I directly tried to pry its mouth open to retrieve the fish, but seeing my aggressive approach, it quickly twisted its body away from me, back-turned, and swallowed the half-eaten fish tail in one gulp. Having stealthily devoured the fish in a flash, Momo slowly turned around to look at me, dazed, zoning out, and retched several times. Looking utterly dejected, I dragged it home, fed it dewormer without a word, and went to the kitchen to process the ingredients. First, I prepared a fish dish for the brothers the old-fashioned way, scaling, gutting, removing the spine, fins, head, and tail. I threw these scraps into the compost bin. I steamed the fish, added water, and blended it into a mush with a food processor. They've always enjoyed this dark version of fish soup, which allows them to eat meat without worrying about choking on bones. However, while I was processing the fish this time, Jojo still lay by the old spot next to the refrigerator keeping me company, but the mop boss kept its distance, retreating under the dining table alone, as I enjoyed spicy crayfish and grilled fish, sipping on honeysuckle dew, and Jojo happily licked up the fish soup. Momo still lay prostrate on the side. It seems that he has developed a psychological shadow towards fish. However, when I get up to crack open a coconut and pour its water into his bowl, he immediately forgets his earlier mood. Eagerly scrambling up to drink his favorite sweet water. The happiness of a little dog is just that simple. The first autumn of the apocalypse, the successfully grafted roses bloom all year round, their branches climbing along the trellis I built, wrapping around the terrace walls. They serve as our home's free, powerful air freshener, masking the smells of kitchen grease and burning trash, while also providing a stable and ample food source for the bees. Jojo has always been enchanted by the scent of flowers, and after tasting rose honey once, he became utterly obsessed. I often see him, fluffy and round like a bumbling bear, stationed in front of the beehive, dumbly watching the bees bustle in and out, his drool nearly reaching the ground. Today is honey harvesting day. Carrying a small bucket for the honey, I walk through the attic, stepping lightly as I head home. Jojo waits at the stairwell, setting aside his gentlemanly demeanor. Impatiently coming up to sniff the beehive and honey I'm carrying, I push his big head away and head towards the kitchen, and like glue, he sticks close to me, mechanically stepping along while looking up at me with eager and pitiful eyes, hoping I'd quickly grant him a taste. Momo also follows me closely, but clearly shows less interest in the rose honey in my hand, just joining in for the excitement. I place the beehive in the centrifuge, telling Jojo, "Good boy. Your sister is going to pick flowers before it gets dark. I'll give you some honey water when I come back, okay?" Jojo's mouth opens and closes. I take that as his agreement. I stir the rich, slightly red-tinted golden honey in jars, then boil the beehive to make beeswax, saving it for future use in lip balms and candles. After handling these tasks, I grab a basket, scissors, and gloves from the storage cabinet and head upstairs to gather roses in the lingering sunset. Jojo dutifully follows with his basket, always ready to help me carry the load, while Momo temporarily disappears, likely busy with something in the woods. Seeing the basket nearly full, and Jojo's basket covered with a light layer, I take him home to drop off the flowers, then grab a tennis ball from the house to play catch on the terrace with the 2 dogs. Jojo, slow to react and cautious not to trample my crops, tirelessly catches the ball with his face. One moment he's grimacing from the impact, the next he's happily pushing the ball back to me, signaling for another round. Momo, much more athletic, leaps at the ball, catching it midair every time, then prancing back to me like a proud little pony, easily jumping over obstacles. After an exhausting play session, I return home with the tired dogs. I strip all the thorns from a rose stem and hand it to eager Jojo to play with. I prepare rose filling with fresh honey and rock sugar. Wrap it in ready-made pastry, and bake it in the oven. I also steam a dish of lotus roots filled with sweet glutinous rice that I harvested the other day. Jojo finally gets the honey water he's been waiting for all day. Concerned about too much sugar intake for the dogs, I only mix a couple of spoonfuls of honey into a large basin of water, thinking it's so diluted it would barely pass as sellable. I place the basin in front of the dogs. Jojo sits back, letting Momo drink first. After a few sips, Momo, clearly disappointed, walks away with a wagging tail. Then Jojo approaches the basin, sniffing eagerly. As he tastes the first sip, his eyes widen in disbelief at the deliciousness, drinking the entire basin in one go and ending with a loud, satisfied burp. Amused by Jojo's dramatic reaction, my mood lifts. Leisurely, I sip on an odd cold brewed pu'er tea, savoring the lingering delightful fragrance of rose pastries and glutinous rice lotus roots on my lips. Enjoy the gifts of autumn. Chapter 11, The One Who Brings Firewood for All. In the second year of the apocalypse, at the end of summer, early in the morning, I was shoveling earthworm soil in the attic when I suddenly heard the roar of a motorcycle approaching from the distance. I immediately dropped my tools and rushed back home, peering out through a small gap in the curtains with a telescope to assess the situation. The motorcyclist entered the area and slowed down, seemingly searching for something specific. The rider was a tall man in military uniform, his age indiscernible due to the helmet he wore. Like me, the nearby zombies in the self-built houses of the villagers were also curious about this unexpected visitor. Those that could move freely stretched their arms and chased after the motorcycle. Those trapped collided aimlessly with their gaits like headless flies. After scouting the area, the rider made a sharp turn, stopped his bike, and efficiently used a crossbow to eliminate all the zombies lured out by the noise of his motorcycle. He then headed straight for the tallest and newest farmhouse within the walls, killed 2 zombies in the yard from atop the wall, and climbed over. Shortly after, he dragged out 3 more zombies from inside the house, opened the gate, and piled up the 5 zombies from the yard together with those on the national highway, retrieved all his crossbow bolts, and then revved up his motorcycle to return the way he came. While nibbling on a northeastern rice bun for breakfast, I stood by the window waiting. Within an hour, a convoy of motorcycles approached from a distance. Leading the convoy was the same rider, followed by 11 old military sidecar motorcycles, with passengers in 10 of them and a skinny mongrel in one. Another off-road motorcycle brought up the rear. Having experienced the despairing traffic conditions of a post-apocalyptic world in my previous life, and keeping up with news online while the internet was still available, I knew that the entrances and exits of highways and city streets were blocked by numerous abandoned vehicles. Under such circumstances, without armored vehicles to clear the way, traveling by ordinary car was impractical. It was not surprising that this group opted for motorcycles, which offer greater mobility, though they also have significant drawbacks: exposure to the harsh sun, likely limiting travel to early mornings and evenings. Moreover, motorcycles have a small carrying capacity, meaning these travelers would need to continually replenish most of their consumable supplies along the way. The rider led his people into the courtyard he had previously cleared, locking the gate behind them. Once inside the shelter, the group removed their helmets and protective gear, allowing me to get a clear view of their composition. The team consisted of 5 young soldiers and 1 military dog, guarding 18 civilians. At a glance, the civilians included the old, weak, sick, and disabled, all dark-skinned and thin, but mostly in good spirits. The 5 soldiers included the scout who had arrived first, likely the highest ranking and the leader of this survivor squad. The others were a capable-looking woman, a strong man over 190 centimeters tall, a young man with sideburns, and a skinny youth who appeared to be no older than 20. The captain and the tall man carefully carried a woman in a coma down from one of the sidecars. She seemed to have recently undergone an amputation, with her right arm severed at the shoulder and her bandage soaked with dark red blood. The woman was placed in a room by herself, and the female officer, carrying a silver briefcase, stayed there for a while before coming out to have a grave conversation with the captain. Judging by their expressions and body language, shortly after, the captain spoke to the people in the courtyard, who then sprang into action. They pulled some supplies from beneath the sidecar seats, and some began to make fire to boil water. The bearded young man and a middle-aged man, carrying items, headed towards the sea. The captain and the tall man, each carrying a tactical backpack, rode their off-road motorcycles toward Ichuan city center, disappearing into the distance. The suspected military medic led a young man and woman out swiftly after them, quickly clearing the remaining zombies in several other houses, then entered the woods with their rifles. Only the young man with the military dog remained in the courtyard, guarding the rest of the civilians. I turned my gaze towards my aunt's balcony, where several chickadees were happily pecking at the dried scallops she had laid out on bamboo mats. Auntie was nowhere to be seen. Seemingly undisturbed by the commotion caused by the convoy, the sea in the north differs from the clear, bright seas of tropical regions. It is a somber, gray hue, imposing and solemn. With his beard, the man changed into snorkeling gear, unrolled a red life-saving rope, securing one end to himself and the other to a large rock on the shore, and then slowly submerged into the sea. The middle-aged man who came with him didn't enter the water. Wearing a life jacket, he vigilantly searched the shore for shrimp and crabs stranded by the receding tide. The bearded man moved back and forth in the sea, each time bringing back a net full of rich seafood pried from the shallow reef. After his third time ashore, he was clearly exhausted, sitting down casually, taking the food and water handed over by the middle-aged man, eating quickly, and then resting for a long while. The sun was high in the sky, and the sea was calm. Having thoroughly combed through the small beach, the middle-aged man walked up to the bearded man with a metal bucket in hand, talking while gesturing towards the small courtyard, seemingly persuading the bearded man to head back. The bearded man waved his hand, put on his fins again, seated the middle-aged man where he had just been, and dived back into the sea, inside the small courtyard. 3 young men divided themselves into groups to collect some old grain and spices from neighboring houses and dug up some edible vegetables from the villagers' overgrown plots, bringing them back to cook lunch. I watched them all morning like a creeper, my eyes sore, rubbing my eyes as I added water to the self-heating hot pot, planning a simple meal, with the self-heating pot steaming on the coffee table and the cold fan continuously blowing. I propped my chin on the balcony, dozing off with the 2 puppies. Just as I was about to fall asleep, a thunderclap exploded beside my ear. I suddenly opened my eyes, my eardrums buzzing, my heart racing, only to see the green ivy leaves continuously slapping against the glass window, making a cracking sound. The light dimmed, and the wind howled. I rushed to the window with binoculars to check on the situation by the sea. Perhaps because the bearded man's diving gear was dark gray, blending into the turbulent dark waters. I couldn't spot him. I could only see the middle-aged man, swaying and struggling to pull the life rope towards the shore. Lightning and torrential rain fell at the same time, and I couldn't keep watching. I threw on a raincoat, rushed to the terrace, and tried to move all the movable crops into the greenhouse in the attic. The rain poured down, hitting people diagonally with the wind, the force as strong as a high-pressure water gun, painfully stinging. Fortunately, fearing for the sun-loving crops under the harsh weather, I had already expanded the greenhouse, covering most of the planting area, so there weren't many plants that needed rescuing, and it took less than 10 minutes to move them all. I wasn't sure if the soldier in the sea had been rescued. I returned inside, heading straight for the balcony. The wind uprooted thick trees. The middle-aged man was blown to the ground, still clutching the rope, never letting go. I couldn't find the bearded man anywhere, only seeing the bright red life-saving rope bobbing in the increasingly turbulent waves. Luckily, the wind was blowing from the sea towards the land, potentially carrying the bearded man ashore. Through the binoculars, I saw a young man leading a German shepherd and 4 men rushing towards the sea. The strong wind and slippery muddy road made the 5 men stagger, occasionally losing their balance, needing to rely on stones for support. The skinny German shepherd looked as if it could be blown away by the wind. It misstepped, fell heavily among the jagged rocks, got up, shook off, and rushed to the front of the group, unaware that his companions were nearly there. The middle-aged man on the shore used his hands to push against the ground, struggling to stand, and jumped into the sea, attempting to rescue the bearded man. To me, his action seemed very irrational. Indeed, the middle-aged man had only swum a short distance against the wind when a wave crashed head-on, sweeping him into the raging currents and seemingly robbing him of control over his body. Although his life jacket kept him afloat, it couldn't extricate him from danger. Now 2 people awaited rescue. A mastiff was the first to reach the shore, perched atop a cliff. It gazed out to sea for several seconds, seemingly mapping out a rescue route before leaping into the water without hesitation. It was then that 5 people arrived. A young man agilely jumped down the rocks, quickly assessing the situation on the water. He fixed a rope through the sleeves of his own life jacket, handing one end to the others who had just clambered down, said something, and then plunged into the sea. In the water, a middle-aged man lay unconscious, floating face up. The mastiff paddled vigorously toward him, with the young man trailing behind. On the shore, 4 people secured the young man's rope to a boulder and started pulling with combined strength. The mastiff reached the man first, flipped him over to keep his nose and mouth above water, and grabbed his clothing to tow him back. Midway back, the young man took over one arm of the middle-aged man. Seeing this, 2 people on the shore quickly began to pull on the young man's rope. With the collaboration between the man and the dog, and the pulling force from the shore, they safely made it back. However, the situation with another individual identified by his beard was grim. The snorkeling spot was near the shallow coast, usually not far from the shore, but from my elevated viewpoint, it was clear that the red rope attached to the bearded man wasn't making any progress. Despite the efforts from the shore, the young man noticed something was amiss. He had the people on shore shelter the middle-aged man from the rain and perform CPR, while he and the mastiff prepared to dive back into the water. Just as they stepped into the sea, a fierce wind and heavy rain abruptly ceased, silencing the world as if a mute button had been pressed. Everyone froze for a moment, except for the relentless waves crashing against the shore. The scene was eerily surreal. The sea had once again donned a mask of calm. The young man, with the mastiff, reached the end of the red rope. He removed his life jacket, fixed it onto the mastiff, and dived into the sea. The middle-aged man regained consciousness and was helped by several people to kneel on the ground, anxiously waiting as he faced the sea. Meanwhile, I glanced quickly at their campsite. The elderly, women, and children left behind were also in trouble. An elderly man with white hair pursued his companions with an agility that defied logic, scattering the crowd as they sought places to hide. I saw people rush into the room of a woman with a severed arm. The old man, losing his target, futilely rammed his head against a window. In less than 3 seconds, 2 individuals who had entered the room of the woman with the severed arm fled in panic, chased closely by her. She and the old man cornered them. Suddenly, a young girl burst out of the house, swinging a pickaxe high and striking down both the old man and the woman with the severed arm. The others then cautiously emerged from their hideouts. The turmoil at the campsite quickly subsided. I turned back to the sea just in time to see the young man dragging the bearded man ashore. I had braced myself for the bearded man to be dead, imagining him entangled in seaweed and disheveled. Instead, he was surprisingly neat, except for his wide-open, pale eyes and a combat dagger stuck in his temple. The young man, cradling the body, knelt on the gravel, while the mastiff mournfully circled them, nudging the bearded man's hands and face. The recently rescued middle-aged man scrambled over. A sudden mountain wind arose, stirring the forest and sweeping between the high buildings with a mournful, deep sound like a sun. It was like a desolate, lingering elegy. The long night was approaching, and the storm seemed ready to return. Given the intense heat, one would expect the heavy rain to merely add to the humidity and mugginess, yet I surprisingly felt a long-lost coolness in the air. Before nightfall, the 3 military medics returned from the forest, each carrying a string of drenched prey resembling soaked chickens. In the courtyard, everyone was busy stripping green skins off walnuts and handling rabbits, each person silently focused on their tasks. The military medic, along with a mastiff, stood guard outside the courtyard gate. I couldn't see her expression due to the angle, but I noticed her repeatedly wiping her cheeks with her sleeve, her chest heaving dramatically before she suddenly crouched down and buried her face in the dog's neck. I drearily cleaned the pens for the livestock, methodically filled the feed troughs, finished shoveling the worm-filled soil left from the morning, and finally collected the fallen fruits in the greenhouse to take home. The heavy rain began again, thankfully without the terrifying winds this time. Until bedtime, I saw no sign of the 2 off-road motorcycles in their small courtyard. I had a dream where I was a school-aged child with braided pigtails. That year, a severe snowstorm halted buses and made cars impractical, so my mother walked me to and from school every day, holding my mother's warm hand. I confidently took small steps on the icy sidewalk. By the roadside was an old man selling handmade popcorn. A circle of children, reluctant to leave, surrounded his stall. My mother, understanding as she was, didn't wait for me to ask. She ordered a pot from the old man and led me to wait in line beside him. I clung to my mother's thigh, watching a child throw a tantrum over money, his father unapologetically dragging him away by the armpit. The old man just popped a fresh batch of popcorn, the aroma of hot butter and caramel enticing the kids around like little mice, their noses twitching as they drooled. Slowly, the old man prepared the next batch, pouring corn kernels into his modified pressure cooker, adding butter and sugar, then securing the lid and continuously stirring by turning a wire handle on top. The crackling sounds were the corn kernels colliding. Bang, bang, bang. The corn was popping. When the old man lifted the lid, he poured a full pot of popcorn into a paper bag and handed it to me. I happily thanked him, grabbed 2 warm kernels, and stood on tiptoe to feed them to my mother. Just as she bent down, the dream abruptly ended. Momo was restlessly turning in circles on the bed, while Jojo incessantly nudged my face with her cold, damp nose, jolting me awake from my sleep. The room was shockingly cold. I sprang up, hurriedly opened the wardrobe, and roughly pulled down the winter gear from the top shelf, quickly dressing myself and the 2 puppies, ensuring we wouldn't freeze. I felt a bit relieved, only then noticing the continuous crackling and banging sounds from outside. It was hailing. I rushed to the attic with 2 electric heaters to warm the animals there. On the storage shelf, I found a thick mat and a new black and white film, both woven from dried hay I had collected during my spare time. Wearing a helmet and a raincoat, I threw the mats onto the attic roof and climbed up with difficulty, securing them and the solar panel mounts together with ropes. A hailstone the size of an egg struck my helmet, numbing my head, without a second thought. My only concern was hoping my photovoltaic panels were undamaged. Worried that the crops in the greenhouse would be damaged by the hail, I dared not flip the black and white film covering it. I just managed to cover it with another film, heat-absorbing black side out and insulating white side in, leaving only a narrow vent, praying that the crops, which had survived the extreme heat, could also withstand this sudden cold snap. I also drained some water from the rainwater processor to prevent it from freezing and bursting the tank. Finally, I covered the fish pond with a layer of mat. After dealing with the areas directly hit by the hail, I then had time to check on the indoor livestock. Although the outdoor temperature had suddenly dropped to 15 degrees, the building's excellent windproof and thermal insulation properties, combined with the continuous heat from the electric heaters, ensured the indoor temperature remained bearable. The current room temperature in the attic has just reached 6 degrees Celsius. The rabbits and pigeons seem to be doing okay, but the pheasants and quails are more susceptible to the cold, and some have already frozen to death. I've moved the pheasants and quails from their wire cages into an enclosed glass terrarium and turned on the heat lamps. I also stuffed a lot of dry straw into each rabbit and pigeon cage and wrapped the cage walls with insulation film, seeing them recover from huddling together for warmth. I heaved a sigh of relief. Momo and Jojo have been quietly waiting at the entrance to the attic. The temperature inside the house is lower than in the attic, the solar panels aren't working, and the battery doesn't have enough charge left to power additional electric heaters at home. I had no choice but to lay plush carpets in the living room and on the balcony to prevent their paws from getting cold. It's already daylight, and I'm monitoring the outside world through a telescope. Aunt's balcony is a mess. With crops lying on the ground, the bamboo that hung items before is gone, and the dried scallop and spicy peppers are scattered among shiny hailstones all over the balcony. In the small courtyard, someone hurriedly passes under the eaves carrying something. Their cars parked in the yard are all covered with rainbow-colored plastic sheets, and I'm not sure if the two off-road motorcycles are among them. Momo and Jojo are carefree, eating their breakfast, while I find myself unable to eat. In my previous life, the intense heat persisted until the moment I died, which was the beginning of the third year of the apocalypse. This sudden drop in temperature, is it just a brief cold snap, or does it signify that the future has deviated completely from my memories? A chill rises from the depths of my heart. The hail continues relentlessly. Two tall figures in strange attire appear at the end of the road. Focusing, I recognize the familiar military boots. The captain and the tall man have returned on foot at this time. They have straw hats tied to their helmets and are draped in raincoats, with the tall man's raincoat revealing thick cotton pants that are much too short. Apparently hastily gathered equipment, they quickly reach the front of the small courtyard, and the tall man knocks on the door in a special rhythm. A few minutes later, a young soldier fully armed and a military doctor come out of the house and let them into the courtyard. As the young soldier locks the door, the captain and the tall man have already quickly walked to the door of the amputee woman's room, starting to take off their raincoats. The military doctor catches up and says something to them. Both pause as they reach for their backpacks. Then, the tall man suddenly throws his bulky tactical backpack to the ground. Squatting down powerlessly and holding his head, medicine boxes burst out of his bag, scattering on the ground, and the military doctor hurriedly picks them up. Most of the survivors have come out, and a mastiff is being led by a young girl. They stand at their respective doorways, silently welcoming the returnees. The captain, seemingly exhausted, leans on the ground and slowly sits beside the squatting tall man, gently patting his back. The hail has been falling for 3 full days. The power consumption of the heaters and heat lamps used to keep the livestock warm is not small, and the stored electricity at home was depleted by the second day. Since yesterday, I've had to use precious diesel to generate power. The survivor team hasn't ventured out these days, except for the 4 soldiers who risked gathering fuel and warm clothing and bedding from nearby homes a few times. If this situation continues, we will all face the dire situation of running out of resources. Fortunately, the despairing hail finally turned into heavy snow today, and the temperature has risen slightly. I took the opportunity to reinforce and tidy up the greenhouse, and installed supplementary lights inside to provide artificial light to the crops that couldn't receive sunlight. The pothose has lost many leaves and looks wilted. I tenderly fertilized it since there are no insects to eat. It will have to make do with some earthworm soil. I'm not confident about this unpredictable weather that changes suddenly, so I decide to wait a few more days before removing the cover from the solar panels, but those survivors will probably have to risk venturing out for food, perhaps because some members have gotten frostbite and need care from the military doctor. This time the captain, the tall man, the young soldier, and the agile mastiff head out hunting with shotguns. I watch them enter the woods. then habitually turned to check Aunt's balcony. The hail has stopped, and hungry birds have come out to forage again. With a flock of sparrows landing on Aunt's balcony, amidst the chaos, I found myself idly counting sparrows when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure slowly emerge from behind the sliding glass door of the balcony. Caught off guard, I locked eyes with a pair of emotionless eyes. However, the auntie wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on a sparrow startled into flight by her presence. As more sparrows took flight, it seemed to trigger a hunting instinct in her. She suddenly looked up, threw her arms in the air, and leapt towards her prey. With my own eyes, I saw her leap high, tumbling over the balcony railing, followed by a dull thud that I heard as her body heavily hit the snow-covered ground below. I retreated to the attic, opened the door to the terrace, and stood in the snow. Breathing in the biting cold air, the two puppies, which usually would have excitedly run out onto the terrace, sat tensely, both looking up into the sky, ears twitching continuously. Suddenly, as if they had spotted something, they both stood up, their lips moving as if about to bark. I waved my hand in front of the highly alert dogs, signaling them to be quiet. Following their gaze, I saw a slowly moving object in the distance. I quickly scanned the terrace to confirm that the snow had covered the fish pond and the roof of the attic. I immediately ordered Momo and Jojo inside, erased our footprints left in the snow, then went back inside to adjust the cumbersome telescope to get a better look at the unidentified object. My heart clenched suddenly. It was a military transport aircraft painted in iron gray, a Kunpeng. As the Kunpeng entered the airspace, the cargo door slowly opened, and boxes of supplies quickly flew out of the aircraft. Seconds later, red parachutes bloomed in the sky, almost forming a red river. A sour feeling quickly spread from my chest to my nostrils as I watched the supplies land with the help of parachutes, sending off the Kunpeng as it continued southward, and I pumped my fist in exhilaration. Quickly, I changed into outdoor gear and headed out into the snow. Beneath the building, I found the auntie. Her head was intact, but her spine was broken, the pale shards of bone piercing through her thin summer clothes and exposed to my view. She lay immobile in the snow pit she had created, surrounded by little blood, repeatedly trying to lift her head. She resembled more a poorly made wind-up toy thrown carelessly into the wilderness by a mischievous child than a person, devoid of any dignity. I approached to send this stranger I had never met on her way. I was now the only living person left in this neighborhood. Closing her eyes, I temporarily covered her body with snow, then climbed over the community wall, mimicking her actions. Along the way, I killed a few zombies with sluggish movements and, after an hour and a half, finally reached the parcel sized for a single person. Below the package were snowboards designed for easy dragging over snow. Concerned that other survivors might suddenly appear to snatch it away, I quickly unpacked the parcel to check its contents. On top was a stack of colorfully printed sheets, sealed and bound into a booklet, all identical. I pulled out one and quickly skimmed through it. The first page contained a letter outlining 6 points. First, large survivor bases have been established in 9 cities nationwide, where order has been restored and normal production resumed. Second, this calamity targets only humans. Animals and plants do not contract the zombie virus nor serve as carriers, so people can safely consume thoroughly cooked animals and plants. Third, a very few animals and plants might mutate in the new environment. It is advisable to be cautious to avoid unexpected harm. Fourth, we have just experienced a global heavy rainfall event. At noon on the day the rain fell, the zombie virus broke out for a second time. Some survivors mutated without any history of virus contact. It is still unknown whether there will be a third or fourth sudden outbreak in the future, so survivors living in groups should remain vigilant at all times. Fifth, extremely cold weather will persist for more than 2 years. According to current research, zombies move slowly in low temperatures, and the crystalline cores in their brains can be used as durable fuel. The general public is urged to overcome their fear and avoid recklessness, and to collect these crystalline cores for heating and other daily needs when personal safety can be ensured. Sixth, major bases are intensifying the cultivation of cold-resistant, high-yield crops. Once the new varieties are stable, crop seeds will be included in subsequent airdrop packages. Lastly, the indomitable fighting spirit of the Chinese nation flows in the veins of every citizen. Please take care of yourselves while waiting for rescue and strive for self-rescue. Believe that, just like countless hard-fought battles in history, victory will ultimately be ours. The subsequent content includes basic planting knowledge, first aid guides, weapon modification tips, and a national map detailing the addresses of 9 survivor bases. The various supplies at the bottom of the booklet are not necessities for me, so I do not intend to take the share of other survivors struggling to survive. I repacked the package and hung it on a conspicuous large tree using a parachute. Then, clutching the booklet and a piece of bright red fabric I had cut from the parachute, I quickly returned. In my previous life, I was trapped in isolated Georgia until the day I died in despair, not knowing that the scattered soldiers still continuously sacrificed themselves to protect the public, and the nation never abandoned its people. Ignoring the tears freezing on my face, they burst out and I fiercely wiped my face after removing my goggles. At this moment, I firmly believed that victory will surely be ours. The 3 hunters returned fully loaded from the forest. The youngster carried 2 strings of small animals, while the team leader and the tall man each dragged a simple wooden raft. The rafts were loaded with 2 goats, a roe deer, several burlap sacks of unknown contents, and a familiar box of supplies. Despite the heavy load, everyone moved briskly. I think they must have also seen that letter. Perhaps they even had a heartfelt cry in the forest, venting all the hardships and grief of losing fellow travelers along the way. A dog limped beside the team leader. Seemingly hesitant to put weight on its front paw, the team leader crouched down, petted its head, and lifted it onto his raft, ordering it to lie down. The dog appeared obedient, but as soon as the team leader turned around, it jumped off the raft and continued to hobble through the snow on its own. Seeing this, the youngster put his game on the team leader's raft, picked up the dog, and with a quick call to the team leader and the tall man, he briskly ran ahead, leaving his steadier companions far behind. A simple funeral was held in the small courtyard for the bearded woman with an amputated arm and the white-haired old man. The team leader and the youngster rode motorcycles with modified tires into the city. The tall man led daily hunting trips into the forest, while the dog stayed in the courtyard to recover, keeping company with the military doctor and others organizing the interior. Their yard was nearly always filled with steam, as people took turns tanning the hides of the game and cooking large pieces of meat, making jerky, mushroom sauce, and other dry foods. 3 days later, the team leader and the youngster not only retrieved 2 off-road motorcycles, but also brought back a middle-aged couple and their daughter of about 10 years. The addition of this family of 3 brought the total number of people in the small squad back to 23. The survivors' squad began packing their bags. From my observations, this team now lacks neither food nor medicine, but what they really need are proper weapons. They only have 3 guns and 2 crossbows, which are always handled by a few soldiers. But seeing this doesn't mean I can help, as I had exhausted all connections before the apocalypse to arm myself with only some melee weapons. All I could offer them was some food, not the low-fat, high-protein meat they hunted from the forest, but high-sugar, high-calorie chocolate energy bars and compressed biscuits. Their diet of seaweed, seafood, and red meat was indeed promoted as healthy before the apocalypse, but considering their high daily caloric expenditure and the cold environment, continuing to rely on such foods as their main sustenance could lead to an insufficient caloric intake long-term, potentially severely affecting their heart and immune system functions. Ever since the apocalypse began, I had barely touched the stash of junk food I had. I sorted out 2/3 of the boxes I had in storage, adding brown sugar, old ginger, a hand crank generator, outdoor power supplies, and various dog supplements and common medications for the military dog, including down jackets and liver essence, milk, iron, protein. I took a roundabout route to deliver these items, hiding them in a house about 5 kilometers from their courtyard. I waited for the heavy snow to completely cover my tracks before sending a drone, which I had placed on the windowsill of the house with a letter attached, flying into their courtyard. I had 3 drones that had never been used before. I planned to leave this one for them to use for scouting in the future. The letter had a simple map drawn on it, and if they followed the arrows I marked in red, they would be able to find the house and retrieve the supplies. I saw the captain and a tall figure cautiously receiving the supplies, quickly checking the boxes for anything unusual before swiftly taking them back to the courtyard. The next morning, after breakfast, everyone in the courtyard stayed inside, probably waiting for the noon warmth before setting out. I was busy preparing half a month's worth of feed for the poultry and fish, while Momo was energetically herding its goat brother, burning off its excess energy. Suddenly, they stopped their frolic and ran to the balcony, turning to look at me. I turned off the feed machine, dusted myself off, and walked over. By then, Momo was frantically clawing at the balcony's blackout curtains. I pulled open a slit and peered through my telescope to see what was outside. I saw the captain and the mastiff standing at the community gate. My whereabouts had been exposed. My amateur counter-surveillance skills were no match for the professionals and their dogs. If the mastiff could track my scent all the way to my community, it could easily locate my exact apartment. However, they stopped outside the community gate and did not intrude into my territory, a sign, I believed, of the captain's goodwill. I wondered why he was looking for me and whether I should show myself. With a cautious mind, I decided to wait and see. I noticed that every 10 minutes, the captain would signal the mastiff to bark loudly a few times. It was probably the first round of barking that had drawn Momo and Jojo to the balcony. The mastiff's bark was deep and calm, and neither I nor the little dog sensed any aggressive intent. It seemed to be merely acting as a neutral, canine doorbell for its companion. The big fellow was rather endearing. After the sixth ring, the captain probably decided that even if I were a heavy sleeper who slept into the afternoon, I would have been awakened by this persistent alarm. He then tied a red package to the top of the community gate and left with the mastiff at a trot. I watched them run back to the courtyard, ready to rejoin their prepared comrades. The mastiff, dressed in a bulky down jacket, neatly jumped into its basket, while the captain mounted the off-road motorcycle he had arrived on. He gestured to the people behind him, and the next second, 4 soldiers mounted their rides, simultaneously raised their arms, and gave a neat military salute in my direction. I was momentarily stunned, clumsily raising my hand in return, my eyes moist with warmth. He who brings firewood in the snow should not be left to freeze. As an ordinary person who chose to look out for himself in the apocalypse, I was honored to shield these heroes from the snow for a while. May you turn misfortune into blessings. After watching them set off, I went to retrieve the captain's package tied to the gate. Coincidentally, the red cloth of the package was from a parachute from which I had once cut a piece. Inside the package were a crossbow, 20 arrows, 100 meticulously cleaned zombie cores, and a handwritten letter with forceful handwriting. Coal in the snow, deeply grateful. With nothing much to offer, I send you a crossbow. Handle it with care. Once the land is peaceful, I will repay your kindness like a spring gushes forth. With respect, Ping Jianhui. Chapter 12. The Other Side of the Rainbow Bridge. The second autumn after the apocalypse. Although I had been regularly feeding the pothose with mealworms and earthworm soil, its leaves gradually lost their lush greenness, blending inconspicuously into the snow-covered world, lying dormant unnoticed. After a month of practice, the crossbow left by Ping Jianhui had become an extension of my arm. I often venture out alone to hunt zombies and collect their energy cores. According to a booklet found in the supply box, each core can keep a fire burning continuously for 7 days. I view these cores as the last act of assistance from those unfortunate victims to their fellow survivors, burning the residual life force within their bodies to help others survive the harsh winter. I started clearing zombies within a 15-kilometer radius from my neighborhood, accumulating nearly 500 energy cores. Within this limited area I could reach, I haven't encountered any other survivors. I often walk alone in the snow, feeling as if all the birds have flown away and all the paths of humanity have disappeared. The vast world seems like a silent graveyard, scattered with desolate hills and wild tombs. The second winter of the apocalypse, as scheduled, the Kunping drone returned, this time airdropping improved varieties of potato and sweet potato tubers and tomato seeds, well protected by breathable elastic materials. Since there were no other survivors in my area, I took both supply boxes home this time. The planting instructions stated that these new varieties are cold-resistant, not picky about soil or nutrients, and can grow well without much light. They are not only nutritious, but also produce high yields. Survivors could easily grow them indoors using sufficiently deep containers. I planted these 3 new varieties in the corridor connecting buildings A and B, planning to gather them when mature to supplement the diet of the household poultry and livestock. Due to the continuous heavy snow, I had to climb to the attic roof 3 times daily to clear snow from the solar panels. One morning while shoveling snow, I tripped over my own feet and fell off the roof. My heart raced, anticipating a severe injury. However, after hearing Jojo bark, I miraculously hovered about 30 centimeters above the ground. I think I know how the foolish previous incarnation, Momo, managed to survive the apocalypse. Because I hadn't brought them home, the dogs, Jojo and Momo, slowly healed together. Jojo had not fully recovered before the apocalypse struck. Both humans and zombies coveted fresh meat, forcing the 2 stray dogs to constantly hide. Perhaps during a life-threatening moment, Jojo awakened an ability to manipulate objects, thereafter protecting Momo. In return, Momo shared its hunting gains with Jojo, and they supported each other to forge a path to survival. However, one thing doesn't make sense. I didn't see Jojo near Momo before I died in my past life. Had it already lost its trust in humans? It's all unknown now. Lacking survival skills in the apocalypse, I dared not take Momo and Jojo out with me easily. The 2 young ones hadn't freely run around for almost 2 years. I brought back a log from the wilderness and spent a day shaping it into a human head, which I then attached to a life-sized cotton doll I had made. I began training Jojo to use its ability. Once Jojo could skillfully use its power to shoot arrows through the wooden head, I took them out of the building for the first time to help them adapt to this cruel new world. Jojo was smart. It quickly learned to identify the human-shaped creatures emitting a rotten smell as its targets, achieving nearly perfect accuracy with its arrows. Later, it could even extract the energy cores while piercing the zombies' brains, sparing me from having to gruesomely smash their heads open and maintaining a last bit of dignity for what were once humans. The food supplies for both humans and dogs, stockpiled before the apocalypse, were nearly depleted. Our home now houses quails and wild pigeons Momo had gradually caught. With their fresh blood, the pigeons' meat and egg production had slightly increased, though the main meat source, the rabbits, had decreased in reproductive capacity. While sipping on pigeon soup slowly cooked with freshly dug bamboo shoots, I planned to catch a batch of local wild rabbits for breeding. Remembering how Europeans often tamed ferrets to help hunt wild rabbits, I silently observed Momo, who was noisily chewing on a large rabbit chop. Its size wasn't much bigger than a ferret's, and it certainly had more brains than one, stuffing it into rabbit burrows to chase out the rabbits. Why wouldn't that be a good idea? With the 2 dogs and a bag of tools, I set off with high spirits. A warren of rabbits would collaborate to dig a complex underground space connecting multiple exits. A true embodiment of the saying, a crafty rabbit has 3 burrows. I found a series of rabbit burrows in the woods. I covered all the other entrances with fine mesh, leaving only one exit open for movement. Standing at this exit, I pushed Teacher Tua inside. Teacher Tua sat at the entrance, his bewildered piggy silhouette looking back, not understanding what I meant. I gave his rear a solid pat, and he slid down the sloped entrance with a clatter. Taking a few steps, suddenly, something caught his attention, and he darted out excitedly, disappearing from mine and Jojo's sight. I quickly sealed this exit too, and couldn't help but imagine Teacher Tua single-handedly disrupting the rabbit warren, sending rabbits of all sizes scattering in panic as they fled from various exits. I envisioned myself capturing each one with a net, a bountiful harvest indeed. The reality, however, turned out quite differently from my imagination. Teacher Tua was a lone wolf. He didn't need any assistance from me. Alone, he wreaked havoc in the den, slaughtering the entire clan of rabbits. I watched him busily going back and forth into the cave, each trip bringing me a rabbit with its neck run dead. My expression grew numb. Teacher Tua was a hardworking and uncomplaining good dog. Unfortunately, his intelligence was all spent on honing his hunting skills. And I couldn't make him understand that I needed live rabbits, he just needed to herd them out. My sustainable development plan declared bankruptcy. I ended up carrying a string of plump, well-fed rabbits, while Jojo carried Momo, the grade contributor who was too tired to walk, and we leisurely headed home. Next time, I'll just set up a few traps myself. Content. I thought this as I savored a freshly cooked spicy rabbit head, spring of the 3rd year after the apocalypse. This spring has been extremely busy. The oil stocked up before the apocalypse had long been consumed. I had just used an oil press to extract some vegetable oil from our own corn and peanuts and began refining the animal fat accumulated over the winter. The 2 puppies were obviously very tempted by the oil residue, but I would never feed them such unhealthy food. I ruthlessly chased the hopeful pair out of the kitchen. As the white fat particles turned golden brown and sizzled chaotically in the pan, even the usually restrained Jojo, following Momo's example, desperately covered her eyes with her paws, probably preferring out of sight, out of mind. The radishes and cabbages in the shed adapted well to the apocalyptic cold weather, fresh, crispy, and sweet, yet overly productive. I had to turn the surplus fresh vegetables into jars and jars of sauerkraut and Korean spicy cabbage, usually, while I worked. The 2 puppies would each clutch a cabbage, crunching away beside me, seemingly undeterred by the ice-cold bite. Various fruits also began to fruit recklessly out of season. Blueberries, raspberries, grapefruits, and persimmons ripened simultaneously. I was busy turning most of them into berry jams, honeyed grapefruit, and dried persimmons, among other snacks, to be consumed slowly. Sometimes, after finishing the chores, I would dig out a honey-roasted sweet potato from the dying embers. Split it in half, one half for the 2 dogs and the other for myself, accompanied by some chrysanthemum tea with goji berries to soothe the heat and slowly savor, dispelling the day's fatigue from the inside out. The store-bought dog treats at home were completely used up, and I started using a dehydrator to make homemade jerky and meat strips for them. Whenever the dehydrator was running, Momo would circle around me like a child sweet-talking parents for candies during New Year's, rubbing against me nonstop, and even spontaneously learned to beg for food, pulling out all stops in a pitifully adorable manner. Meanwhile, Jojo, who, according to the doctor, was only a year older than Momo, had already lost that intense craving for most foods. She became increasingly composed, resembling an elder to both me and Momo, her gaze filled with peculiar kindness and affection. On the day the sauerkraut was ready, I made a rabbit meat hot pot, continuously heated on a charcoal stove, its golden broth bubbling gently, infusing the room with a tangy aroma. I sat down at the table, too impatient to fish out the rabbit meat, and instead peeled an apple, removed the seeds, and cut it into slices for Jojo and Momo to share. This was Jojo's favorite fruit, and as usual, she sat up neatly the moment I took out the apple, quietly waiting to be fed. But when I offered her a slice, she hesitated, pulling back several times as if the apple stung her mouth. When she finally took the apple into her mouth, she didn't chew but swallowed it whole. Momo had finished his portion and was still contentedly licking the crumbs that had fallen from his mouth onto the ground. Jojo, no longer wanting to eat, carried his apple over to Momo, who was engrossed in mopping the floor, and quietly lay down, smiling as he watched Momo devour it. My heart sank. I sat cross-legged in front of Jojo, lifted his big head, and looked into his eyes, asking, "Old pal, why don't you like apples anymore? Are you feeling unwell?" I gave Jojo a thorough check from head to toe and found 2 empty sockets where his molars had fallen out. Just last night, when I brushed his teeth before bed, those teeth were still intact. How could it be that overnight, 2 molars had fallen out, and even his canines were starting to loosen? A great anxiety enveloped me instantly. I knew that Bernese mountain dogs typically don't live past 10 years. But my Jojo was only 6 years old this year, the 3rd autumn of the apocalypse. After the loss of those 2 molars, Jojo's health deteriorated rapidly. In just half a year, he aged at a pace that caught both Momo and me off guard. He would often, while trying to keep his spirits up to pick berries with me or play with Momo, suddenly fall into a deep sleep without warning. His gentle, moist eyes gradually clouded over with a murky film. He still tried to play with Momo, even though he now needed the ramp I had originally made for Momo to get on and off the bed and the toilet. His appetite and digestive ability had worsened, and eating was no longer a pleasure for him. I would grind his food into a fine minced meat with a blender, and watch him, out of consideration for my feelings, try his best to lick his plate clean every meal. Despite this, Jojo rapidly lost weight, becoming as frail as he was when we first found him. One ordinary morning, Jojo suddenly lost control of his hind legs. From that day on, we stopped all our other activities and stayed by his side relentlessly. I used a folded blanket slung under his belly, lifting the ends of the blanket to keep his hind legs slightly off the ground, helping him walk using his front paws. Perhaps feeling that this was tiring for me, he was still willing to let me help him go to the bathroom, but he refused to let me carry him to the terrace for fresh air. He spent most of his days in a deep sleep, each breath producing a labored sound from his throat. I often woke up suddenly in the middle of the night, sitting up to check his breathing. If he happened to be awake, he would lick my hand and look at me longingly with gentle eyes. I didn't know what Jojo thought about when he was awake, but in his mysterious little head, I couldn't read despair or distress in his eyes, only a silk-like pity and reluctance. He was like an elderly man in his twilight years, who had long let go of his fear of death, but could not let go of his concern for those he would leave behind. The 3rd winter of the apocalypse. One night, Jojo lost control of his bladder. He knew what he had done, and his old, cloudy eyes looked at me with guilt. I struggled to suppress the tears I had held back for over half a year, knowing that he was nearing the end of his life, just as my mother had before she passed away, and life was about to repeat the withering process before my eyes once more. I bent down and pressed my face against his, saying, "It's okay, baby, you didn't mean to." I cleaned him up, took out a large bowl of finely chopped honeycomb, and fed it to him piece by piece, watching him chew each bite with satisfaction, his stiff tail happily thumping against the mattress. After he finished his favorite rose honey, I held him in my arms, placing Momo in the middle of his belly. He seemed like a weary traveler about to fall into a dream of rosy sweetness, his eyelids uncontrollably closing, then suddenly forcing them open again, unwilling to let go of me. I kissed Jojo's forehead for the last time, trying my best to keep my voice from choking, and smiled at him. "Jojo is very tired, isn't he, sweet boy? Go on. My mom will meet you at the Rainbow Bridge." Jojo gave me a doggy smile, kept his gaze on me, and gradually stopped breathing. My mind suddenly became dazed, as if returning to the time when Jojo secretly nibbled on flowers. On the evening when the stab wound occurred, every detail seemed as if it happened just yesterday. How could it possibly be gone? We remained motionless for a long time. It wasn't until Jojo's body became as cold and stiff as a specimen that I fully realized Jojo had left its temporary earthly shell and had moved onto a realm beyond our reach. Jojo left behind its worn-out body, freed from the burdens nature had imposed on it, and became an unbound spirit of freedom. Our gentlest big brother, our most loyal companion, our most reliable protector, had parted from us forever. Momo stayed in the same position, then suddenly began to sob softly. It was saying goodbye to its brother in its own way. "It was nice to meet you, Jojo. Goodbye, our little tiger." Spring of the 4th year of the apocalypse. After Jojo left, Momo and I moved into the smallest bedroom at home and began to live a reclusive life. We had no interest in going out, focusing solely on caring for the livestock and crops at home. Momo became much more stable. It no longer shirked its duties or begged for food. It no longer played lazy or begged for food. Instead, it diligently carried Jojo's basket, which was taller than itself, following me closely, trying to offer me support. It seemed to gradually step into the role once held by Jojo, or rather, it was actively becoming another Jojo. However, whenever it was drowsily waking up and suddenly needed to use the bathroom, it would stand by the edge of my bed, habitually looking back As if waiting for that reliable big dog to catch up and give it a boost. Chapter 13, A Toast to You. Another New Year's Eve, I made a dish of 8 treasure rice with some not-so-fresh grains from my stock, planning to casually get through the day with this meaningful and filling main dish. Momo was on the balcony, staring blankly at the sky. I placed a bowl of homemade dog food, made from various meats and offal, in front of it without disturbing its thoughts, then turned back to the kitchen, just as I was pouring red wine, preparing to drizzle rose honey over the 8 treasure rice. I heard the thunderous sound of helicopter rotors, very close by. Momo turned to look at me, and I moved closer, both of us watching in the direction of the sound. A camouflaged helicopter swept low over our neighborhood, flying so low that I could see with the naked eye that it was spraying something into the air. We watched the helicopter move away, meticulously leaving its mark across different parts of the city until it disappeared into the horizon. My gaze returned from the distance. Suddenly captivated by a flicker of green on the window lattice, a fresh sprout emerged from the bare vines of the pothos. The first day of the new year, as I poured the wine, I seemed to hear a gentle yet powerful female voice broadcasting. I drew back the curtains to look outside. An armored vehicle slowly stopped at the entrance of my neighborhood, with a woman's voice repeatedly broadcasting a message from the vehicle. The global pandemic pathogen has been conquered. Our nation completed the aerial vaccination efforts yesterday. Fellow citizens, the outside world is safe now. If you encounter special difficulties and need help, please hang a red or yellow marker in a visible place at your shelter, and we will assist you as soon as possible. Several soldiers disembarked from the armored vehicle, led by a figure I knew all too well. I stood on the balcony, tears streaming down my face silently. I downed the wine in my hand in one gulp. This toast, to Mom, to Jojo, to everyone who strives to survive.